All right, hello everybody. We're going to call the Thursday, May 5th work session of Narberth Borough Council to order. Ms. Bryan, will you call the roll?
Sure. Council President Fred Bush.
Here.
Council Vice President Michelle Panopoulos.
Here.
Council Member Barbara Fortner.
Here.
Council Member Rob McGrady. Council Member Cindy Rickards.
Here.
Council Member Bob Weisberg.
I'm here.
Council Member Ira Winston.
Here.
Mayor Andrea Deutsch.
Here.
All right. My comments tonight are that we have a full agenda, and I will endeavor to move us through this, try to get us out at a reasonable hour tonight, but we have a lot tonight, so keep that in mind.
Sorry, just point of order.
Yes.
So it looks like we skipped item 3.
Did we? Consideration of any changes or additions to the agenda.
I would like to suggest a change to the agenda. For the executive session we're going to have tonight, we do mention personnel. I'd also like to add disposition of borough property. Not 201 Save On related.
Okay.
No, indeed. All right, thank you. Are there any other changes or additions to the agenda? Well, actually, does anybody object to that change to the agenda? All right, I see no objections. Are there any other changes or additions to the agenda? Okay. So my comment stands. Andrea, do you have comments?
I do. Happy Cinco de Mayo, everyone. I hope you had a chance to get some good Mexican food. If not, maybe this weekend, and enjoy a little holiday. We had a thank you. I want to thank the Narberth Civic Association for putting on a wonderful Earth Day this past Saturday. It was really a well-attended and very beloved event, and they did a terrific job. And in light of having a great outdoor event, I just wanted to remind everyone we have a couple more outdoor events that are scheduled to take place in the borough in the next coming months, including Pride Day, including Music Fest, and including the annual 4th of July fireworks, which we're very excited are coming back, the daytime and nighttime activities. And so a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure these are going off without a hitch. And I just wanted to give a shout out to John Gallagher, our chief of police, for working so hard to make sure security on all these events will go off without a hitch. He takes us very seriously. He works very hard to make sure we are all safe and secure in the borough. And I just wanted to give him a thank you for all work that he does to make these events safe and secure. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Deutsch. Let's move on to public comment. I think we can start in the room. Let's go quickly, Mr. Spear. Ms. Scanlon, you have a public comment?
I do. So now it seems to be out in the open. Last 3 meetings in April, the 4/7 and 4/21, Michelle, you had said that 201 is going to be demolished. Whereas before it's always been, no, we're not going to do anything until we talk to the public. Then on 4/26 at the infrastructure, you said that 201 was decommissioned back in the winter. Now, when we've asked what the plans are, not that you've always said, you as a council has always said, we're not going to do anything until there's public comment. But at that infrastructure meeting, you said there's talks for a small development on the far side of the playground and encompassing part of the parking lot. This council has promised multiple times over the past years before any decisions were made, starting in 2019 when we had the Zoom meetings, and before anything was supposed to be done to this building or any decisions were supposed to be made, this council has promised community engagement. We've asked in 2020, we've asked in 2021, we've asked in 2022, and the answer has been there's no need for meetings because nothing has been planned. What just makes me so frustrated is that you're having 3 public engagement meetings about a flower bed in the center of town, changing the circle to a square. And y'all are going, Planning Commission is going, but there are no meetings about the second largest open space in Narberth. It really, to the community, as I've been speaking to a lot of community members, it shows your priorities are not preserving the parks. Your priorities are preserving a flower bed in the center of town. Now, the council shouts, green space. The town talks about sustainability, zero carbon emissions. But you're not willing to engage the public and say what the plans are and ask what our opinion is on the second largest green space in Narberth? We've said before many times, national park standards say based on our population, we should have 39 acres of open space. And that is printed, that is all over the place. On the internet, easy to find. But we have 8 acres. Not really, not even 8 acres. Because we have 4 acres here and what, 1.5 acres there? At this particular time, you say there's going to be green space up at Sabine. Okay, live your word, make it a park. Imagine there's grants available,
Please finish up
community
your
engagement
remarks.
available, pardon me?
Please finish up your remarks.
Community engagement available. Let's be a leader in green space rather than make this a cement city. I mean, that is where we're heading. We can make this the flagship only ADA park in all of the county.
Thank you, Carolyn.
That's what we need to do.
Mr. Spear,
Sorry, I think I want to respond just in comment form.
please address your comments to us.
I'll address my comments to you. My name is Jim Spear. I live at 321 Grayling Ave. I am the founder of Friends of Sabine Park. I'm also a board member of the Co-op Gardens, which operates garden beds up at Sabine Park at the moment. I am very much in favor of expansion of green space at the park. And I feel that's the plan we're getting from council at the moment. We're with the building due to be demolished. I feel the potential is there to expand green space immensely there, and I feel that's going in the right direction. I feel we can chip away at the surface parking lot, which is over designated for parking at the moment. There's a lot of potential for that. At the same time, the numerous community meetings we've had in the past have shown that there's community support for community functions at that site, including childcare, very high on the list. If you remember the word cloud, I think childcare, pretty in your face there. So I am in favor of taking the building down. It's, I've been in favor of that for a long time. I'm in favor of reclaiming a lot of that surface parking. I'm also in favor of finding a way for Wonder Spring to stay there because they're a big asset to this community. They provide a lot of employment in this community. They provide a lot of needed service in this community. And they bring a lot of, frankly, they bring a lot of diversity to this community. And I enjoy that. So I'm in favor of that. And those are my comments.
Thank you. You have a public comment? All right, let's move to the online folks. And just to let you know, I'm going to told that I couldn't be heard, so I'm going to give you 30 seconds and 10 seconds if you're online.
So as we usually do it for people online who may not have joined us before, if you want to make a public comment, either use the raise hand function on Zoom or just literally raise your hand and then I'll call on you and you're welcome to unmute yourself and make comment for up to 3 minutes. All right, I see Mr. Lawrence Goldberg with your hand raised.
Hi there, good evening. I'm Lawrence Goldberg for 200 Sabine, just across the street from 201. And you've heard repeatedly that we do support open space and creation of a park from corner to corner. So I want to ask 2 questions. I'll try to do my comments in a different way so I can make sure that I get them in. I'll ask the questions at the beginning. Question number one is, will you put on hold or not proceed with hiring the third or fourth consultant to look at this issue? Because in my feeling at this point, the community has spoken, and some of the options, specifically option 4, would be unacceptable. So it would be throwing good money after bad to hire consultants in that. So that's a direct question to council members. And question number 2 is, if you will not do that, will you only entertain option 4 that is a completely self-supporting option? I heard another community members say that he's in support of childcare. There are neighbors that would love to see the childcare remain. The issue is, can it support itself? Can they bring a grant to the table? Can they bring funding for the $1 million or more that it would cost to fund that portion of a new structure? And if not, then there's really nothing to talk about, because the proposal for option 4 that's on the table that funds the childcare building through private dense housing would be funding private pay tuition-based childcare. To me, as a non-starter, I don't see how a borough and a community could be considering diverting income from the revenue stream, even if it's new income that would come in from housing, putting something on the street that we don't actually want, and then using that to support a service that would service a small number of community members. So that's why I'm strongly opposed to option 4 with housing. And I'm asking the question of whether you will take that option off the table, if you will not cease or put on hold the consultants. Will you at least take that unacceptable option off the table? And I'd like to get a response from council members on these 2 questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lawrence.
All right, would anyone else on Zoom like to make a public comment? All right, I don't see anyone else on Zoom with a hand raised.
Sure. Would you want? All right. Chair, would you recognize me just for one moment? Okay.
Sure.
I just wanted to make one comment. Carol Marie, I think you were at the meeting in December 1st, 2021, when I presented those 5 options and council had an extensive discussion about them. That was the meeting when council agreed that we would not could not justify looking at the numbers that we got from eConsult, that we could not justify continuing to keep that building and doing those, needed deferred maintenance. That is when we decided that we would ultimately decommission the building. And over the past 5 to 6 months, one by one, we have ruled out all of the other options except for the 2. One of which would in fact create a corner park, and the other of which would expand parks and recreational space at 201 Sabine at least 3-fold, and possibly somewhat more. So those are the only 2 options on the table. And our borough manager puts, at every business meeting, she has it's like a 4 or 5 page memo updating the status of all of those things. So that's been very much out in the public, and we were going to, that's the process that we're following.
Well, the question we have is why there's no public meetings?
You've had your chance at public comment. This is not a back and forth at this point. Okay. Thanks, Michelle.
Okay.
And okay, I will respond to Mr. Goldberg's question, because he keeps bringing it up. So he's entitled to hear a response, I think. So, as Mr. Spear pointed out, in our initial round of public meetings last year, there was a lot of public concern about childcare and the loss of childcare, and we continue to hear from people who are Wonder Spring users, or have been past users of Wonder Spring, or just feel the need to protect the childcare that's in the area. So that is why we are still considering the option that would, involve them having a space on the property. I think
I have
that's.
several questions for the chair, but I just may.
Yeah,
I just
go
have
ahead.
several questions for the chair, for President Bush. I recollect sitting here for twice a month for the last, at least in September, and probably before, sitting right here and having meetings with all of you. Were those public meetings? And did we take public comment during those meetings? And did we discuss this issue at length in every single one of those meetings? And often at length? I recollect many, dozens of meetings where we took public comment and discussed these issues in public. The only time I've discussed these issues with these guys.
There's a difference in
Carol
public
Marie,
engagement
I just needed to say that. I
meetings.
don't.
Thank you. Carol Marie, sorry, there's not time for the audience to speak right now. Okay. Thanks, everyone. All right, let's move on to the presentation or discussion items. First item on the list is the regulated uses ordinance.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So Solicitor Walco has another municipality that he is at this evening. He did put together a ordinance for council based on the conversations you've had that were initiated by our Finance and Administration Committee in regards to this regulated uses ordinance, which would preclude certain uses in our 5A zoning district, which is the downtown Haverford Avenue portion of the borough largely, and would instead restrict those uses to 5B, which is the Montgomery Avenue corridor. And so this ordinance is, before you to discuss, I wasn't sure if council was in a position yet to actually advertise it. That could be at the end of this conversation. If you want to go in that direction, we definitely could do that. And if you have any further changes to make to it, the solicitor could certainly do that. I'm grateful to Council President Bush. He put together a document for the packet. One of the provisions of the ordinance is certain uses can't be within 500 feet of other uses, notably religious institutions and schools. So he put together a little map here showing where the locations of those sort of properties currently are on Montgomery Avenue, and how they would preclude, those uses near them. So otherwise, I'll do my best to answer any questions council has, and otherwise look for your direction.
Sure. So just to be clear, that's 500, whatever, the distance provision is not actually in the legislation right now. It's proposed. I was just trying to figure out what would happen if we did that, whether there'd still be a spot for this. Because the reason that we have to take this into account is because we need to provide a space for these businesses to operate. We can't simply say you can't operate in Narberth. We have to give them, to make sure there's a place, because these are legal businesses, make sure there's a place they can operate. So there was a list of proposed changes to consider from the Planning Commission, from the Montgomery County Planning Commission. Does anyone have any comments based on that list?
I wanted to know if you could, if John were here, I would have asked him, so if you can represent this. I assume he's read their memo and read all of their review comments. Is he comfortable that our ordinance is solid in view of their comments? The legalities, not necessarily the policy decision. They had some that were quasi-legal questions.
Yeah, I definitely trust his judgment when it comes to the legal component of it, and so the short answer is yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I do think it's important to add again. Oh, I'm sorry, Fred. Is it helpful to raise the reaction hand when we're on Zoom, or just
If you're online, I think you can raise your hand and that'll make it easier. Okay. So I did recognize Barbara, so I'm going to let her.
Well, what I was going to say is that our planning commission in their April 5th letter said that they recommend that we, council, consider the further recommendations that the Montgomery County Planning Commission put in their letter. And I agree with them. I think we should consider these. I think we have to talk about them some. And so I guess I'm wondering, do we feel we can do that tonight without the solicitor here? Do we want to wait until we have the solicitor at a meeting? Do we want to talk about it and then, I don't know, ask the planning commission, our planning commission to weigh in? So anyway, I just think, I'd like to know what direction we were thinking we might go.
Did you say John's going to be here later, or John's not going to be here?
No, he won't be here.
I think Cindy had.
Yeah, Cindy, go ahead. Let me think about that for a second. Cindy?
Sure. I just wanted to reiterate to everyone that we are actually one of the municipalities that do not have ordinance like this in place. And I do think, given the fact that we have such changing storefronts and new development, I do really think that we should expedite this. And while I appreciate now reconsidering what the county has said, I do wonder if it behooves us perhaps to really consider advertising this, getting something on the books, and then we can refine it as needed. Because I do fear that we're in a vulnerable position without something like this in place.
Okay, I'm going to say that if we make any changes, we can't advertise because we're going to need to have John consider the changes. And we're going to need to. So if we plan to make any changes to what's already in here, I don't feel comfortable advertising, but I am comfortable discussing further tonight. So
I'm not sure, I apologize if I missed it. Did you get an answer to your question about whether these distance limitations would block all possible stores?
They would. There's a little picture in the, so I don't know. Yeah, that thing. So 500, if we put a 500-foot limit between parks and places of worship and daycare, which is pretty standard, it would leave about a 2.5 block stretch or 2 block stretch, conveniently near Norbert Beveridge and the public Penn Valley. So,
and is that?
So there it is on the map. It's just Sabine Park. 500 feet from Sabine Park puts you at.
So is that enough, or is that considered? Like, I mean, at some level, you can say there's one store available, right? But
I think that's a question for John. But it looked to me like
I'll say this with the caveat that I am not the borough solicitor. The key thing is, again, we don't want to get challenged by anyone who says that you're stopping me completely from doing what I want to do, because then they can do a curative amendment and then they can put something wherever they want.
Okay, I just wasn't sure what is too small an area.
I would say, on this map, this doesn't seem that restrictive to me. If you did decide you wanted to go with the 500 feet,
okay.
I would warn you, maybe you could probably go a little bit further with it, but I wouldn't go too much further.
Then you might as well not have it, because the district doesn't extend that far.
It would be interesting to look at this and see this as a percentage of the total linear feet of commercial that we even have in the borough available. It's probably a good chunk of it, because we just aren't that big. But
okay.
The municipality's planning code says you just have to make place in your zoning for everything, or something.
yeah, but I think you're right. It can't be one
Can't be one
storefront.
store.
That's
That
not
was
going
my-
to pass.
if we decide we want to put this in, we'll show this to the solicitor and ask his opinion on it.
Okay, I think that we need John's opinion.
Okay. But the question is, do we want to put that in there, right?
Yes.
So,
I guess I'd like to sort of just second Cindy's recommendation that we, maybe, I realize you'd rather not vote to advertise if we're going to change it. But what would the harm be if we were to vote to advertise this, pass this, and then if there were issues to troubleshoot, we'd amend it at a later date? I mean, these things are never, and at least in my experience of doing zonings, we don't always get them right the first time, and I don't think any community does. That's why solicitors are in the business of kind of constantly amending zoning codes throughout the Commonwealth. So I guess I just want to second Cindy's thought that maybe we just move to advertise tonight.
well, in that case, we'll need to go through the recommendations kind of one by one here. So they have a recommendation, a technical recommendation to change the definition of automobile service to automobile uses. Does anyone have any objection to following their recommendation there?
No.
All right, let's take that recommendation. They have a recommendation that we contact Lower Merion Township and let them know that we're passing this because it affects them as well, but that's kind of outside the passage of the bill. They have a concern about marijuana dispensaries, which I think is a question for John, whether marijuana dispensaries can be regulated the same way as everything else.
So I can answer that one, because so as Cindy mentioned, I mean, this sort of ordinance is relatively common, and in fact, I did one during my time in my last municipality, and so the answer to that question is yes, they can.
Okay, so your experience was that they could be regulated like any other, or like similar businesses. I mean,
Yeah.
we've got hookah bars in there, which are, I don't know. I think we actually
I mean,
have
to be
smoke shops
honest,
in
the
there.
regulations in my, oh, I'm sorry.
No, I think that my understanding of this is a potentially litigable issue. This is an issue that could come, that somebody may at some point challenge. It hasn't necessarily been an opportunity to do it, but somebody will probably challenge it based on what they've said, not necessarily our ordinance, but somebody somewhere. But the worst thing that would happen is just that marijuana dispensary provision would be like, you could put it anywhere, like you wouldn't lose, and there's nothing to be lost from putting it in there. It doesn't, the downside is that you are the same place you would be without putting it in, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so the recommendation, Samantha's recommendation is to leave the marijuana dispensaries kind of as is, based on our prior experience.
Can I just make sure I'm understanding this then? Because when I read that paragraph, I was like, I'm not sure what they're telling us. But I think what I'm hearing is that John has included the marijuana dispensary in here as a regulated use, and the Montgomery County Planning Commission is saying, well, maybe technically you're not, that's not how some people would read the state regulations, and so you might have an issue. But if other people are doing it the way John has drafted it, it seems like that has held water, obviously. So, yeah, okay.
Samantha?
I know Cindy has a comment.
Okay, go ahead, Cindy. Thank you.
I just wanted to add that a business could still go through a waiver, could request a zoning waiver with us as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Before the zoning hearing.
Yeah, they'd get a variance.
Correct. They could get a variance. So, as the law changes in Pennsylvania, as we anticipate with marijuana dispensaries, perhaps we could revisit that as well. Michelle, I couldn't tell if you're reacting me to like, shh, don't say those words on Zoom.
I'm bracketing for later.
So, leave marijuana dispensaries in Nazareth. Okay.
I think so.
There are a number of recommendations they have about adult uses. This is the more complicated thing. Mm-hmm. Specifically, the adult uses, adult stores, adult theaters, possibly like, I don't remember what else we have in there. Cabarets, maybe.
Yeah.
They suggest they're suggesting that the borough may wish to restrict the outdoor display of merchandise associated with these uses. Some municipalities prohibit anything explicit on any associated signage or anything at all visible from outside of the building.
So, all right, I mean, that might be a little bit of a borough solicitor question, because number one, I don't know what our zoning ordinance already has regarding signage, and number two, you're wading into, from what I've heard in other places, some First Amendment issues as well. And that's all I'll say about that for right now.
Is there a desire to include outdoor display regulation based on that? Okay, I don't see any. I don't see any yeses. So let's move on to the next one, which is the separation distance. So I just came up with a number which was 500 feet. I think more than that is going to be is not going to be reasonable. We could do less than that. We could leave it out entirely.
I think for whatever it's worth, again, the ordinance I did previously in regards to this did have the same 500-foot provision.
Okay, I'm seeing nods for 500 feet, so let's plan to leave 500 feet. Realistically, it's public parks and places of worship that are I guess there are also some daycare centers, but they're a little stretched further out.
So
So you said leave the 500 square feet, but that has to be put in.
That would have to be incorporated, that would have to be added to
Yes.
the bill.
And so we're only talking about that for adult uses, not for the other restricted uses, is that?
That is
my
the
understanding?
county's recommendation,
Yeah.
is that we look at these for the adult stores, adult theaters, and probably cabarets.
Yeah, where's the definition?
Yeah, it's a gentleman's club. Just another euphemism. As if we didn't have enough already.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
Okay. I had to look at it because it's like, oh, it's a musical. Hey, it's fun. No, that's not what we mean. Okay.
No.
Hours of operation. I feel like, personally, I feel like getting into hours of operation is starting to be a little too much. But
Well,
I mean,
does anybody feel like we ought to incorporate a regulation for hours of
I've heard
operation?
this discussion arise around, in Lower Marion Township, around regulations on gas stations and like mini grocery stores with gas stations, because the surrounding residents, you know, if there's going to be a 24-hour, for example, Wawa with gas, pumping gas, it would be a problem for the surrounding residents. So I mean, I think we wouldn't want to see a 24-hour operation occur, right? Like, and so we might want to put limits on, at least some limits on time, so that we don't have a, let's say it's a shop that decides to open 24/7.
Honestly, is that only for adult uses, or is that, I mean, is that more broad, like you said? I mean, if there were a mini mart that opened right on our side, right, if we have Wawa open on our side, and there were a 24-hour whatever, that's right next to a Northwood resident's house, it
That could be a problem.
the same problem. So it wouldn't really be limited to adult uses, and I
Or
don't think we have,
Maybe we should, do we have?
that was hours of operation in our zoning code at all.
We should probably have.
yeah.
I don't think it
24
belongs here.
bookstore? That sounds
It's
ridiculous.
I don't think it belongs here. Okay.
No, but we
Yeah,
want
not
some,
here.
but we should, can
So
we
we'll,
just
we
make
should
a
look
note
into
to look into
it.
that?
So we'll look into it for a more general concern. Increased buffers. Some municipalities have chosen to require additional buffer distances or additional landscaping around these uses.
I mean, it's Montgomery Avenue.
Well, so, yes, and some of those properties back up to residences of the borough. So, to me, this is the same question as the hours of operation. You know, do we already have appropriate
We must.
buffers? And if we don't, then we should consider the,
Generally.
yeah, generally.
Yeah,
as
okay, so
opposed to
this is a
specific
general
to this.
concern. We don't see the need to include it in this.
I mean, this is sort of like, a good example of this is the Aviva situation. Where like they have parties there, but that's not like in this category or the problem, same
No.
problem applies. Because the neighbors complain about the noise from the parties after hours, but it's not.
So we can look into a more general rule.
Yeah.
All right, the final recommendation is conditional use or special exception, saying we could add it, make the adult uses require conditional use or a special exception.
So that's actually what I was about to mention when we were talking about marijuana uses, is actually, I'm not saying we should do this, but the ordinance I did before did make marijuana as well as adult bookstores a special exception. But I don't know if we want to go that strict with it.
I mean, I'm not sure. I understand the marijuana, the adult bookstore. I guess I don't see the relationship there. But again, we can do this now. I see no harm in being more restrictive. To Bob's point, we can amend. Businesses could come and ask for a variance. I'm comfortable keeping the hours in this. I'm comfortable keeping the buffer zones until we can figure out larger, perhaps more borough-wide restrictions.
So this wouldn't be keeping, we'd have to like write
Yeah,
these
we
rules. They're not in there now. The county is recommending that we add these in.
Yeah.
They're not in the legislation at the moment.
Oh, for the buffer. Okay.
I feel pretty confident that if council wanted to advertise tonight, I feel pretty confident like that technical change about autos could obviously get done. The 500-foot buffer, I feel pretty confident could get done. And if you did want to add if you did want to make any of those uses special exceptions instead of permitted uses, that could be done pretty easily. And then you could go ahead and, if council wanted to go ahead and pass the ordinance, and then figure out the hours of use and buffers after we've done the ordinance, because as we've discussed, we want to figure that out for all zoning districts, not just this.
But you're saying that there's certain of these categories that would have to be, that you wouldn't just by right allow them to come in here, they'd have to get a special exception to come in here?
If council wanted to do that, you could.
Oh, I thought that we had to allow businesses of all types someplace in the borough.
So,
Special exception.
so you do, but they just have to get a special exception from zoning hearing board.
Well, what happens if you say no? I mean,
Well, it's granted if they meet the conditions.
Yeah.
okay, sounds good. I'm not a lawyer, so.
Yeah, I mean,
Works for
basically,
me.
special exceptions are pretty routinely granted. It gives the zoning hearing board an opportunity to put reasonable conditions on it.
Okay.
But that's about it.
Okay.
I mean, usually it'd be working on
All
something
right,
like
so special
your
exceptions.
signage, right?
Are
It
we-
would be the
Yes.
opportunity to do
Yes.
that.
Okay, let's,
So moved.
we'll take that recommendation as well. Okay,
So special exception only for adult uses or for all
Only for
of
adult
these uses
uses.
or marijuana dispensaries or what?
I would
Thoughts on that?
recommend that if you're going to do special exceptions, that you do it for anything related to marijuana or adult uses, and the rest would be fine to be permitted uses.
Okay.
I'm fine with that. Yeah. Special exceptions are not really hard to
The
get.
thing is, then do we also want to, maybe if we're going to advertise, we can't put the conditions on. Conditions of the special exception. Especially unless you put conditions, which you can get the special exception.
Okay,
There's no
so
point in having one.
No,
And so, something like,
the zoning
something
hearing board
like.
has
no?
discretion to put
So-
reasonable conditions on special exceptions.
so not to bore everyone here, but just make sure we're on the same page with with zoning and special exceptions and all that. So there's not like a specific set of criteria you have to meet to get a special exception. As Michelle mentioned, a special exception is more an opportunity for someone to come before a zoning hearing board, and if something seems really off kilter, to give the zoning hearing board to decide on any conditions to impose on the use.
They just have to be reasonable. They're usually very mild.
Yeah, like the standard, I
It
mean,
could be something
the
like, you
standard
know
to get
what,
a special.
that sign you're gonna put on there, let's work on something a little more tasteful for the neighborhood. And they would usually agree to it because it just makes it work.
So this is,
It'd be that
The threshold for a special exception isn't as high as the threshold for a variance, in my opinion.
Oh, not.
Not at all, yeah.
Barbara?
so this, we're not talking about doing conditional use. We're talking about doing special exception. Okay, because
That's
I
what I've
think
heard.
to Bob's point, if we were doing conditional use, then wouldn't we need conditions or something, so.
No.
Okay,
So no disrespect to any borough council or elected body out there, but really the only difference between conditional use and special exception is whether the governing body or zoning hearing board hears the
okay,
petition.
okay. Okay,
Okay, so it seems like people are comfortable with that special exception
yes.
for adult uses and for the marijuana dispensaries. Okay.
I have no problem.
All right, so do you have what you need?
So if we are going to actually advertise, I do need an actual motion from council to advertise with these changes.
I mean, the advantage of advertising now is we would pass this at our June business meeting rather than at sometime in July. If we advertised at our May business, we're gonna have to wait till July to pass it.
Now you could, if you did advertise it at your May business meeting, you would be able to approve it at your June business meeting.
Really, we have 30 days?
Yeah. Oh no, it's not for an ordinance, it's not 30 days.
Oh, okay.
It would only be, if the only changes you make are in response to the Montgomery County Planning Commission letter, then I'm comfortable with saying that we wouldn't need to go through that review process again. And for an ordinance, you only need 7-day advertising period.
Okay. I stand corrected.
That's what I'm here for.
All right. Hopefully for other things as well. Is there a motion?
I move to advertise what do we call this?
Regulated use.
The regulated uses ordinance with the following amendments, changes. That we accept the Montgomery County Planning Commission's revised definition of automobile service. That we make adult uses and marijuana dispensaries available by special exception only. And that we include a separation distance of 500 feet from public parks and places of worship for adult uses.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor of advertising the regulated uses ordinance? All right. Thanks, everybody. Let's move on to 7B, the Philadelphia Furniture Bank proposal.
So I'll start and then maybe Carol Marie can then back me up here. So we had discussed at the council business meeting back in April, a fantastic idea from one of our borough residents, Ms. Carol Marie Scanlon, about having the Philadelphia Furniture Bank try to incorporate our spring cleanup week into their operations so that potentially some furniture could be donated as opposed to just being thrown out. So I know that I had a little bit of outreach with the Furniture Bank, but I believe that Carol Marie had an opportunity to speak with them further and had asked for some time here during this agenda item to share with council the conversation and discussion and kind of parameters she had worked out with them. So Carol Marie?
So I've lived in Narberth for over 40 years, and while Trash Week is always such a fun time for trash picking, I mean, my kids thought it was the best thing ever, and the good stuff we've gotten over the years, it always has dismayed me how much good stuff is thrown away. I got new dining room chairs one year. Beautiful dining room chairs, better than what I had, so my chairs went out. So, we talk about our goal of the climate action plan and the comprehensive plan to reduce waste generated in the borough. So I thought this was a great idea. Philadelphia Furniture Bank was started in 2014 to be a centralized resource for furniture for human service organizations across Philadelphia. I'm reading from their website. Member agencies schedule appointment for their clients to go to the showroom and choose furniture to start fresh. Examples of those who benefit from the Philadelphia Furniture Bank are people moving out of homelessness, victims of domestic violence, young adults leaving foster care, immigrants, refugees, veterans, and people leaving emergency housing. So it struck me when I researched them that the one thing they said is, based on their feelings at Philadelphia Furniture Bank, they believe no child should sleep on the floor. And that really hit me like, yes, no child should sleep on the floor. Each family that is accepted into their program receives an entire home's worth of furnishings for free, including brand new beds. Beds are not included in the pickup. Since 2014, they have furnished 3,500 homes. So it's a big program. You can call, if your mother has passed away and you're downsizing, you can call and get them to pick up. But with everything that we put out, we can furnish more than one home with this. So I have a list of what they accept and what they do not accept. So in a nutshell, they want to furnish a small apartment, like a 2-bedroom type apartment. So they'll take sofas, armchairs, kitchen and dining tables, kitchen and dining chairs, dressers, end tables, coffee tables, bedside tables, bookshelves, desks, mirrors, clean rugs, and artwork. They do not accept mattresses, bed frames, china cabinets, baby things because of recalls and all. Household items, I thought was unusual, like dishes and things, and sleeper sofas. They have entertainment centers, outdoor furniture. They don't want pianos. So these type of things. So what we can do in Narberth, and I had several conversations with the Furniture Bank, is advertise through the weekly newsletter and say on Sunday, we've arranged that Philadelphia Furniture Bank has a 16-foot box truck. They will come Sunday, we'll tell them what time. Say if we want to have them come at noon to give people a chance on Saturday and Sunday to put their junk out. Because typically, when you do your clean out, you do it on Saturday and you finish it out on Sunday. Even if your trash day is Wednesday, you still put your crap out on, or your stuff out on Saturday so people can come and pick. So it seemed really easy. They'll do one sweep through the town Sunday. If I have a dresser that I want to put out or a sofa that I want to put out, I put a sign on it, piece of paper, that says Philadelphia Furniture Bank. And that means it's for the Philadelphia Furniture Bank, not for my buddy Jim to come and say, ooh, I like that sofa, it'll break my dining room. If someone else comes and picks up my sofa, okay, fine. Jim, you picked up my sofa. But in general, it's a way that we as a community can give back to the greater community, keep our stuff out of the landfill. Now, let's say that I have a sofa and it's a leather sofa with all the grumpy and all the stuff on it, and I put my Philadelphia Furniture Bank sign on it, and they may say, no, thank you. Then the trash guys will pick it up. So if we do this they want to make one pass, do it on Sunday, and they have a specific person who's coming in extra to do that. They are thrilled at this opportunity. Now, St. Margaret's, you might have noticed, is having a Habitat for Humanity. Several years ago, St. Margaret's did this Habitat for Humanity. The difference is that you got to take your sofa, Jim, over there. It's not going to fit on your bike. Yeah, it's not going to fit. I mean, I drive a Suburban, so it's going to fit mine. I can take it over there, but it's not going to fit in your car. So the difference is if people, and their Habitat for Humanity is the week before, which means you got to get your act together the week before and get your stuff over there. And they may have a lot of stuff that goes to them. Perfect. Habitat for Humanity and Philadelphia Furniture Bank work hand in hand. But the difference is, Jim doesn't have to schlep his sofa over to St. Margaret's. So it's really not competing with them, it's completing with them and offering different to the community.
Quick question. So the way this works is they'll make a pass through on Sunday, and anybody who's put a Philadelphia Furniture Bank sign on an appropriate piece of furniture they will take on that day.
If it is within their parameters.
So we need, an appropriate, like something that they pick up. So we need to find a way to get the signs to people and advertise this. Is kind of like, that's the.
Well, the advertising is easy. That goes through the website.
Can people print out their own signs?
You can take a crayon on a white piece of paper and say Philadelphia Furniture Bank, tape it on there, and Philadelphia, there's not a special. I believe in, let's make it simple. We don't need to make this complicated. If you want to put your sofa out, put your sofa out. If you want to put your sofa out on Tuesday for your Wednesday pickup, put your sofa out on Wednesday. But it gives the community an ability to reduce waste, reuse good stuff, and reduce our bill for the trash hauler.
All right, thank you.
Is the Philadelphia Furniture Bank saying they will not take anything that doesn't have a sign on it? Or is that just something you're suggesting so that other people will know?
Well, the driver, there's a lot of streets in Narberth. There's 11 miles of streets in Narberth. Mm-hmm. So this driver who's never been to Narberth before is going to get, I'm giving him a map, and I'm going to say, do this. Mm-hmm. And put one-way street. We just saw a car go one way down the street here. Get the arrows, and that way, on his pass or her pass or their pass, they're going to go down St. Mine Avenue, then they're going to go up Wayne Avenue, then they're going to go down Price Avenue. And if they see something they want, great. But mostly they're going to be looking for the crayon sign or the marker sign that says Philadelphia Food Bank or Furniture Bank.
My question was just for the communication that goes out, to be clear whether you absolutely have to put a sign on your item saying Philadelphia Furniture Bank if you want it picked up by them. And it sounds like the answer is maybe no. I'm still not clear.
The answer would be yes.
Okay,
The
so,
answer
all right,
would be
well,
yes.
so here's my only concern with that is, the entire borough doesn't receive the newsletter. We've tried really hard to get everybody to sign up for the newsletter, but we all know plenty of people who still haven't signed up. So I'm just saying, if this is the Philadelphia Food Bank saying, Philadelphia Furniture Bank saying, we don't want to take something that doesn't have a sign on it because we don't want to mistakenly take something that we shouldn't take. That's
Well, I'll
fine.
tell them, if they're driving by and see a bookcase on Wayne Avenue and it doesn't have a sign, but it looks good, and it's obviously in a trash pile, or a pile.
That's what I'm wondering, do we?
I don't know about
That's,
that.
so that's what I wanted us to.
I think if some people don't get the message, it's not
Yeah.
good.
Okay, I just wanted, no, but I wanted our communication to be clear.
And then we can always put a sign in each of the kiosks around town, put one at the train
Absolutely.
station, one at the post office.
Maybe somebody can flyer door to door.
So, to Carolyn, I think it's a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
But I've lived here for a long time. I have people in my family who like love that week because they go out and look for good stuff that they can rehab. And there's a lot of competition out there, let's just say. Like,
Sure.
it goes pretty quick. So I just don't want this furniture bank to be like surprised when they get there and there's not a lot of
Well,
stuff
and
left by
that's,
the time
well,
they
you
get there.
know what? And that's the.
It's not a bad problem to have.
It's the honor system. We have advertised this through the website and through the newsletter and on the kiosks. And if Jim sees this really awesome coffee table that I put out and says, "Ooh, that looked great." And it has a big sign, I'm picking on you, Jim. I've known you a long time. This says Philadelphia Furniture Bank, and someone says, nobody's looking, I'm gonna snag that. It is what it is.
Look, they take stuff off of people's porches, so.
Oh, I know, Fred Hansen lost his lawnmower.
I'm just saying, it's a real, anyway, enough.
Okay, thanks. I think, do you have any other concerns?
No, I think it sounds like a great idea. I mean,
All right.
it's something I feel comfortable having the borough office advertised, so thank you, Caroline.
So I will talk to the Philadelphia Furniture Bank, confirm the time they're coming, and we'll work on a flyer.
Sounds great.
And I'll get their official flyer off their website so we know, kind of make it look fancier than my flyer right here. But
Right.
I think it's a great idea. It's a good way to also make everybody feel really good about their junk.
Yeah. Thank you, Carol Marie. It's a
Thank
great
you.
idea.
No problem.
Okay, let's move on to item 7C, which is the discussion of the skate park pilot. Who wants to lead off here, Michelle?
I'll start with
Sample.
mine. All right, thank you, Council President. So in the packet, there's a memo that I'm, not, it's a lot of words on that memo, so I trust, people have had the packet for almost a week now to have had a chance to read it. My thanks to Council Vice President Panopoulos, who is our Chair of Infrastructure, summarized a lot of the discussion that happened at Infrastructure regarding the skate park pilot. So I think the memo is pretty thorough. I mean, I'm happy to try and answer any specific questions the council has, and I'm sure maybe Michelle might have a few other things to add. But really, my goal here tonight is to get some direction from council. Most notably in regards to making sure we're comfortable with these proposed rules. Making sure that council is comfortable with what we're proposing, and then we would still need to come back to council to discuss the layout further. And if there's anything else we need to finalize at that point, we certainly could on the 19th. But really just wanted to let council know where we're at with the skate park pilot and make sure council is comfortable with the details that the infrastructure committee had discussed.
Yeah, I don't know if everybody's had a chance to read it. There were some things that the infrastructure committee specifically decided would like to sort of bring to full council. So, but maybe before we do that, if there are any things that are in here that infrastructure decided that you have some concerns about or questions, anybody? Then we can maybe just talk about the things that we covered. So the hours of operation were that was sort of the main issue. We talked about that a bit and sort of summarized our discussion. The base proposal was sort of 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Those were also some hours that were discussed when the Parks and Recreation Board did discuss this at their meeting last month. But Rob, maybe you want to make the case for sort of a staggered rollout and let everybody consider what the best way is to move on this.
I was thinking with any pilot, there would be things we want to iron out as we.
Rob, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Okay, I thought we could try shorter hours and move to longer hours later, but I think that would require some, work on our end. It would take several months probably to make a change in the hours and the pilot. So I don't feel strongly about it, but in general, I just anticipate there'll be some things we need to work out, and so that's why I was thinking shorter hours to start.
Sorry, Cindy. Go
Fred,
ahead.
can I just ask a question about the times? Is there any reason why folks can't be skating while others are playing basketball and the lights are on? And if the park is in use and folks are utilizing the basketball courts and the lights, why can't they do so as well in the skate park?
Yeah, so there's as of yet unknown issue with the skate park around noise, and so there's an argument for like seeing how it goes. There's one camp that says it'll be no noisier than the basketball courts. There's another camp that says it'll be quite a bit noisier. So the only way we're going to find out is to do it. So by having the hours a little bit shorter at first, then we don't like start off like, waking people up, like keeping people up late. So it's just because there's a little bit of an unknown there.
Do the lights actually cover the tennis courts?
Not directly.
Not really.
Yeah, I'd be hesitant if we didn't have it well lit.
Yeah, there's also maybe a safety issue with skating in the dark.
Okay, I actually assumed that ambient light would light up the skate park as well.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Again, it's one of those things. We could see how it goes.
I will say this, any day now, the lights out there should be converted to LED. That's the last remaining part of our LED conversion project.
Oh, good, because a bunch of them are out, but I guess.
Yeah, exactly, but I would, that's above pay for me to really make a recommendation on the hours right now, so.
So does anybody want to propose,
I'm comfortable with the committee's recommendation on this.
Well, the committee didn't want to make it.
I saw it's in the notes
I mean,
here.
kind
9
of.
to 7.
It's 9,
Two
it
of us
says
were
that
going
the
9 to
committee's
7,
base
but-
proposal is 9 to 7.
Yeah, but Rob had some of the, he had a counter view, so the committee the committee decided we would just sort of put a pause on that. My preference would be 9 to 7. Maybe we should just sort of do a straw poll. How does everyone feel about 9 to 7?
9 to 7?
Yeah, I'm fine
Rob,
with that.
you're all right with that? I hear you. My main reason is that I think it will be harder for us to get data in a timely fashion when, when this pilot is likely to be most popular, sort of in the good weather months, if we don't open it during the hours when users will use it. So.
Yeah, I can go right.
All right. Do we need to vote on this, or we're good?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think we're good. Okay. The opening date, I guess we don't really need to discuss that. This is a target date, but there are some conditions that need to be met, and so we can talk about this 2 weeks hence and see, if there's anything that's held it up, then we can push it. But for now, we're thinking of that. So the proposed rules, there's a draft in here. They are very similar to the rules in pretty much every other skate park in the nearabouts. And some items that are, I think, from our insurers model rules, and I'm hoping everyone had a chance to look at them, see if you think they're appropriate, if you think they're complete enough. And I also have a couple of additional rules I'd like to ask you to consider that have come to mind since then. Not to make it too lengthy, but does anybody have any comments?
Mayor Deutsch?
So I looked at the proposed rules, and it was implied, but I think, unless I missed it, I thought it should be explicit that you can't move the ramps.
Well, it's pretty much physically impossiple.
Is that right? Okay.
You're bringing equipment in to do so, but
Jeff says that like the three of them can't move them, so.
Okay. It was implied, but I didn't know if you get a bunch of people together, if they push it, I didn't know.
Certainly add that to,
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
But number 12, all skating structures are to be utilized in a manner consistent with their intended usages and shall not be moved. Okay, is that good?
Yep.
Then I wondered if we
But
wanted to.
did you have more?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is that it, Andrew, or do you have more?
She just muted.
Okay.
I wondered if anybody thought that it made sense to specify a minimum age for participants in the skate park. I mean, we're only opening it up for like skateboarding, not for scooters and such forth. And there's really nothing that a 3-year-old should be doing in there probably that's safe.
Yeah.
So it's not intended to be used as a climber. So for its intended use, I think there is a certain minimum age. And in some ways, it's duplicative because we've already said, don't come in unless you're going to use it for its intended use. But
Does Radnor have that?
they do not have any minimum age.
And I went to Radnor with my child when they were a toddler, and it was fun, so appropriate.
Okay. We could include a rule telling people not to skate in inclement weather. So, for example, you have those days when there's showers, you shouldn't be skating when the surfaces could be slippery. Although I think that's also fairly apparent. It's kind of an apparent thing that they're slippery. But I wanted to bring it up anyway to see if anybody had an appetite to specifically tell people not to do that.
Perhaps we can,
And it's also not in Radnor's rules.
perhaps we can block it if it's a bad
Well,
day.
that's the next thing I was getting to.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I would suggest that on the borough may damage, defacement, or other maintenance issues, Rule 17 may result in immediate closure, that we add, severe weather or inclement weather. So if you have one of those days when it's like pouring rain all day, or we're getting like the effects of a hurricane on shore, we just keep it locked. But you have days when it's basically a nice day, but you have a squall for an
that's
hour.
different.
Do you want to tell people to skate then, or just let them
But
use it?
there's a sort of simpler way, which is to say the borough may close the skate park at its discretion.
That's true.
But then
That's
you don't
right.
have to predict- you don't have to predict all the possible reasons.
That's true, that's what I'm gonna say, yeah.
Andrew?
I was going to say that the borough reserves the right to close the skate park at its discretion.
As discretion without
And
advance
we
notice.
do regardless of what we stated here, but.
Right, but
it's
I
nice
mean,
to let people know.
okay, just,
I think that's good.
then you don't have to start enumerating all the reasons why you.
Right.
That rule that enumerates things was taken from Radnor, but I think it's more elegant to just keep it simple.
Yep.
Kiss. All right.
We are going to have to leave it locked on very rainy days because the drainage on those cliffs is terrible. So
Yeah.
we're going to have to
For any reason
not
such as
unlock it if it's going to be a long
Jetting,
range.
I
debris
don't even
getting.
think you need to list the reasons
Yeah.
why. I would
Better
just say,
off.
we can close it whenever we want to.
Such as weather or damage.
That makes absolute sense to me.
But we don't have to say.
Did you have anything?
No, so those will be revised.
For different information.
Those will be revised. They'll go to the solicitor. I think they'll go to our insurer. If there's any changes or any further things for discussion, we'll bring them back in 2 weeks and take a look. But otherwise,
Well,
does anybody have?
let's just ask the borough manager, do you have any problem with that discretion part? You're good with that?
No, I think that's great, yeah.
Because it's going to be your discretion.
Yeah.
That's a good point, yes.
Please.
Well, that's true, might be the police, they might be,
Okay,
no,
but-
this is not safe, let's close this. I trust their judgment on it.
There was really nothing else. We weren't necessarily, the committee did come to a recommendation on the monitoring of the skate park, unlocking and unlocking. It's whatever a manager's, discretion to determine how to staff that. But for having a skate park monitor, I mean, I tried to summarize our discussion here. Does anybody have any comments or thoughts, or does this make sense?
Yeah,
Okay,
it makes sense.
Last thing is the branding, promotions, and events, not something we need to do now. But the committee did discuss sort of the idea, if there was a small group of interested volunteers, elected officials, just skateboard aficionados, I don't know, who wanted to work together and find ways to promote the skate park, seek to bring to council or to the office or both proposals for events to be held there, not profit-making events, but events to increase interest. Is that something that you would be amenable to, I guess maybe the infrastructure committee sort of spearheading, putting them together and then letting keeping you in the loop, and then if that group has any ideas, they can bring them to council? It would be sort of an ad hoc, unofficial, I don't know what to call it. So are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, I thought that
Okay. Yeah, a working group that doesn't sort of make decisions, but just sort of brings suggestions to council for council to make decisions, because that would be outside of sunshine if they're making decisions. Okay, well, they're not an agency, so.
I just have
No.
one suggestion.
Yes.
When I really liked the fact that there was an active life survey when we did the bike pilot.
Yeah, that's it.
And is it in there already? Because I didn't see it. I didn't see it on the. Oh,
Yeah, I
good.
skipped over because I think it was
It's
controversial.
definitely planned.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I think that Samantha indicated the office would want to take the lead on that. I did put a request in here that we just have some members of the skateboarding community take a look at it. Because I wouldn't know what to put in a survey for skateboarders either, because I've been skateboarding. All right, so with that, I think we've gone through that and have everything we need to move on for now, and there'll be a further report in 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Not for a council discussion, no.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other comments on that. Okay. Next up, update on ad hoc parking committee residential parking discussions. Barbara.
Because I'm gonna be talking for a while, I'm likely gonna want a sip of water at some point and take my mask off. That
Good.
maybe should make the recording even better. This is really the first time that we're providing a lot of information. We've brought to council from the parking committee, a number of things for you to look at already: the revised parking violation ordinance, the selection of Park Mobile for how do you say that? An online way to pay for parking meters, the parking controller hiring, and the municipal parking lot ordinance, which is very close to coming before you for final review and consideration for advertisement. But what I wanted to do tonight was give some background information on how we got to where we are with our current recommendations for residential parking. And I'd be happy to have any feedback you care to give us right now. And our plan, though, is because we still have some things to work through on residential parking, but we also then need to work through the commercial parking concerns. And our plan is, after we've done that, to come back to council with a full plan, because we know some of the commercial parking things might affect the residential parking and vice versa. And we want to really make sure this is a comprehensive plan. And once that whole thing is available, then council could decide now it's time to draft an ordinance. So, we're not drafting anything at this point. Before I start, I want to thank my committee members, Bob and Rob, and Manager Bryant and Michelle Carroll. They've been meeting twice a month since late October. I really appreciate their willingness to dig into the nitty-gritty of this. It's really kept us moving along, and it's made it almost fun. I'm not going to say it's totally fun, because the details of parking are really, they can just take a lot of time to go through. So this committee was tasked with formulating a comprehensive borough-wide parking program that recognized a number of things that are expressed in both our comprehensive plan, the climate action plan. The streets are a valuable public resource. We use them for travel and for other things, and we need to make sure that the streets are shared equitably. We need to have policies that allow for multiple uses and multiple users of the rights of way in the borough. So when we think about some of those things, we obviously the first thing we think about is parking because that's what we're tasked with here, but we need parking for residents, guests, shoppers, owners and employees of businesses, SEPTA commuters, deliveries, accessible parking for people with mobility limitations, EV charging stations, just a whole host of things that how parking is used. But that's not the only thing we use our right-of-way for. I mean, we use it for traffic safety and calming features, like ensuring that we have unrestricted sight lines at intersections, so you can't park right up to the intersection. We are going to be using it for stormwater management features like curb bump outs that have stormwater retention facilities in them, street trees, streeteries, which we're seeing now, parklets perhaps again someday, and other uses. So there's a lot of different uses of this resource that the borough provides to all the residents. So to do our work, we started by looking at the December 2017 Nelson Nygaard Parking Study Report, the September 2021 Narberth Parking Study Task Force Report, and then information that borough staff has provided us throughout this process. Just want to remind everybody those two reports, the Parking Study Report, the Parking Study Task Force Report, had a lot of general recommendations of all kinds of different things that you could do, but neither one of them provided a specific parking program, which is why the ad hoc parking committee was created to come up with that. So when we looked through those reports and with the information from the borough staff, we came up with concerns that we then wanted to try to solve. We wanted to make sure that we could solve as many of them as possible. So I'm going to list the ones that we saw from the parking study and the task force, and then some of the ones that we added after that. So, and these are not going to be a surprise to anybody because we all experience this, or some of us experience these throughout the borough. You're not always, if you're wanting to park on street in a residential area, you're not always able to find a space close enough to your home, depending on the part of the borough that you're in and how the parking patterns are there. When we have a lot of streets that are fully parked, you know, pretty much curb to curb, corner to corner, and that results in restricted sight lines for pedestrians, for drivers at intersections sometimes, and particularly for drivers entering and exiting driveways. So that results in some safety concerns. Fully parked streets also mean that we end up with double parked delivery vehicles, and you know, we're seeing a lot more of those than we ever did before. If you're driving down a yield street, in other words, one where the width is so narrow that two cars can't pass side by side because maybe both sides of the street have parking on them, if those streets are fully parked, it becomes very hard to have the traffic move down those streets. People who live adjacent to a 2-hour zone sometimes can't find a spot near their home to park in because the person in the 2-hour zone adjacent to them had to park around the corner because there was no space for them in their block, which is how they're required to park right now under permitting. Because we see that sometimes parking problems spill over onto blocks adjacent to existing 2-hour zones, we're asked sometimes to add new 2-hour zones. So we have this 2-hour zone creep. We have areas where driveways are underutilized. People could be parking off the street, but they don't. We have apartment buildings that provide garages, but people don't use them, and instead they're parking on the street. So we have more cars on the street than we might otherwise have. We have some situations where on-street parking is used for long-term storage of vehicles that are used infrequently, if at all. And then we other times have on-street parking used by non-residents of the borough who know that they can park their car here for a week and catch the train to the airport and go away on vacation and come back and know they'll find their car. So So we know that we have, those are all concerns that have come up through all of the surveys in the past, the parking study, and the task force. And so we, though, as a committee, as we were looking at this list of problems, we noted some other ones that we thought we should try to address as well. There's inequity in that some drivers have to pay for on-street residential parking right now, and a whole slew of others don't. So the only folks paying for on-street residential parking are the folks in 2-hour zones right now. There's inequity in the system because some residents don't have cars, so they don't directly benefit from on-street parking, and yet, there's some cost for having all of that space because it's factored into the cost of running the borough, having all the right of way. And we also realized through some analysis that Borough Office did, the current permit fees don't cover the cost of administration and enforcement. So we need to take a look at that as well and consider that. So we're trying to address all those concerns, and you can see there's a lot of them, and some of them kind of conflict, and you pull on one and it upsets another. So it's rather complex, but we think we have something that is a start, at least, of solving a lot of them. So we want to start, our recommendation is to start by making changes to the current permit program. So that would be for the streets that are currently regulated, which are through the 2-hour zones. So it would just apply to those areas where we've got existing 2-hour zones. We would maintain those. We wouldn't add to them or subtract. We would just leave them the way they are for right now. We felt that if we didn't make any changes that way, then we would be able to really see what the impact of the changes that we were making would be. So we have a better sense of, okay, the changes are just because we make some changes. So we're proposing that we switch from using parking permit stickers to instead using a license plate reader system. So stickers will go away. We would allow a permit holder to park anywhere on their street, not just on their block. So we're hoping that will solve some of the problems of where someone who lives on a 2-hour block, 2-hour zone block, can't find a space on their block and they go to some unregulated street. We spread it out for the whole street. We're hoping that will take some of that away. We're going to propose a new fee structure. We'll talk about that in a minute. For the residential permits and also for guest passes. Right now there is no fee for guest passes. We're suggesting that the rollout be staggered to both ease the administrative burden in the beginning, because there's going to be a lot of change, and also just so that the permits don't all expire at once going forward. I mean, that also then eases some of the burden down the road. And we're going to follow the office's recommendations on that. I mentioned that we're still working on some details around residential parking. We still have some things to iron out for multifamily dwellings and some things around guest passes, but we're working through those. What our plan is that, once a new program is put into place for the currently regulated streets, we would monitor the impact of that and determine if the concerns have been alleviated, which ones and how many, and is this an improvement? Look for any new concerns that have arisen, and then if we need to make adjustments in the program, we will. As we feel like we're going to get some good data, it'll help, then we'll be able to see what else might need to change. After we've had that program in place for a while, we don't know yet what a while is. We're still talking about that. It kind of depends on how long the rollout takes too, but we'll see. We would suggest that we should consider expanding the program in some fashion to parts or all of the borough. And we've talked about this in the committee, that if we're going to address the concerns in those areas, which are some of these concerns about people using the streets for long-term storage of their car, or for parking when they're, somebody who doesn't live here parking when they're on vacation, or I just don't want to pull into my driveway and I'm gonna, park on the street, even though I have neighbors who don't have a driveway and need that space, If we're going to solve some of those issues, we will need some form of permitting. I don't think there's any other way to incent people to change their behavior. We couldn't come up with anything anyway. And so one of the things we've talked about, and we're still continuing to talk about, is requiring a permit to park overnight in these other areas of the borough, either parts or all. And that would be something that would say you can't park between, say, 1 and 5 a.m. So it wouldn't be like, oh, so if you have a party, people's cars can still be there. But there's still things that we have to think about around that as well. So we're continuing to work through the issues that might come up in doing that. But we think if we decide we want to address some of these other concerns, we're probably going to have to do something like that. It's, there's just no other way to make that change that we can think of. But we're happy to have input from other people. So that was a lot. I'm happy to shift now and show you what the fee structure is that we're proposing, if you'd like, or if you'd like to stop for a minute and if you have any questions, or how do you guys...
Yeah, let's pause for a moment.
Sure.
If anybody wants to ask questions. Yeah, right.
Which, the overnight permit is to address which problems? That's what I didn't make the connection.
The problems with underutilized driveways, the problems with people using the on-street parking for long-term storage of vehicles that maybe aren't moved at all.
Won't they just get a permit and park?
That's what we're saying.
So you're not trying to stop them from doing that, you just want them to get a permit?
No, we want them to get a permit, and
Okay, but I'm sorry.
Sure.
But somebody who's parking a vehicle for long-term storage would need a day permit also.
Not in a this is in the non-2-hour zone areas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, all right, so this is to say, you were talking about night permits for places that do not have any permits, but not just making them permitted all the time. And that's what I'm confused about. Why not?
Well,
so can I just
sure.
a fundamental question? What made the committee decide, because you might have addressed it, I missed it. What made the committee decide to reject the Nelson Nygaard recommendation?
Which recommendation? Oh, you mean
to have 3 parking zones?
They talked about 3 parking zones, but did not say what you would do within those zones. They didn't have a recommendation of how you would do permitting within them necessarily. They just were saying you might have some permitting required in the zones and it could be different. And they talked about different enforcement hours, but they didn't say 2-hour zones here, overnight parking here, or whatever. And we talked about whether zones were necessary, and we weren't convinced that they were. Because...
Isn't that what we have now?
No, we don't have
Or
the 3.
effectively, it's a zone. It's like you're on the 200 block of Marion zone. Like we have, I thought the idea was to get away from having dozens of different regulation areas and just, I thought their point was sort of simplified. You could even make it the entire borough with 1 permit, or 3 zones. That's what I'm just saying, that overall like,
sure, but can I just say...
I'm just wondering what was the committee's thinking about that idea.
Sure. They did not recommend taking away all the 2-hour zones. That wasn't what their recommendation was. They were talking about overlaying the 3 zones on top of the existing 2-hour zones. Which, yeah.
That was not my understanding.
Well, that's...
I think they were talking about simplifying everything, just having 3 zones. Each zone had the same regulations within it. You could park anywhere in zone 1, on your street, on somebody else's street. That's what I thought they were saying, but But that would be something that you could do. So even if you didn't think they were saying it, what would the reason not to do that? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Is that the question you wanted to ask? What you were
Yeah,
saying?
and I'm just realizing that we had such a long conversation about that issue. And I was looking to see if I could find the meeting minutes, and I can't pinpoint which meeting, because we've been meeting twice a week, twice a month. But I do think it's a question that we should pull out.
Sure.
And almost prepare a little synopsis of the thinking so that you can get closer to what we were thinking about.
Yeah.
I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
On that issue, on zones, but also on the overnight issue.
Yeah.
Both of those, because they both require more than just like sort of one or two idea answers.
Yes.
It's like all of these things, as soon as you start to think into them, there's 4 or 5 or 6 different related issues, and it's sometimes hard to give a quick answer as to why that was the recommendation, because it gets, as soon as you start thinking into it, it gets really complicated.
It really does.
Your question was more about zones than overnight, right? Like, your question was like, why not just go with the Nelson Nygaard simpler than what we currently have? And I think what we did is we picked a median between the two, and we said, okay, we're going to simplify what we currently have, but it's not going to be as simple as Nelson Nygaard. And what we decided on then was that a named street would be a zone. So you'd have the Conway zone, the Dudley zone, the Essex zone, the Forest zone, etc. Forgive me, I'll stop you.
No, I think that's all correct. I think my perspective on it, and again, I'm kind of going off here, just kind of ad lib here a little bit, is that I actually felt the 3 zones were more complicated than our current system. And that's why I'll admit I was very reluctant to adopt the 3-zone system.
And then I'll add that having been on the committee for several years that managed requests for new parking, requests for new 2-hour parking, where we would have 30 people out here from, a block. Say for example, the people of 200 block of Conway or of Dudley were saying is, well, we need a 2-hour zone now because people who are on another block are coming over here and parking on our unregulated street. There's no room for us to park here. So people from a regulated place are coming over to an unregulated place, and that's why they wanted a zone that was different than their next door neighbors. And so if you say if you divide up the borough the way Nelson Nygaard suggested, basically you could have people on the most northern edge of, say, Zone B, parking their car on the most southern edge of Zone B, displacing someone who would really need to park near their house because they're downtown shopping or something, or at the train. And so we just felt like it wasn't giving the residents what they wanted, which is the opportunity to park as close to their home as possible. And this was the way we could think of it. The only way we could think to make that most possible.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you're not, okay, because I wrote, you said maintain existing zones.
Well,
but we are really talking about expanding them. Basically, where they're chopped up now, you would create a continuous zone that would be
And much cleaner, more consistent, simplified.
Down the road though. We're not doing that initially because we felt that if we made.
No, I think that was an initial.
No, I think I should make sure we're semantically on the same page here. So when we say that we're not, I want to be careful how we use the word zone.
Yes.
So we're not talking about any street that's currently regulated would not become unregulated. Any area that's currently unregulated would not become regulated.
Exactly.
That's what we're saying.
Yeah.
So that's maintaining the existing zones.
That's,
well,
except, so if you live somewhere right now where you have to get a parking permit, the change that we're going to make is that you no longer have to park only on your block. You can park on your whole street.
But what if part of your street doesn't currently have parking?
That's fine. You can park in that block.
Oh,
just like you already could.
It's just that people who are, they can't.
Exactly.
Yes.
And some of the thinking behind that is that people generally know the people closest to where they live.
Yeah.
You see the person across the street, you see the person next door, you know when they're walking and to whom their car belongs. So it's if a person, say, well, anyway, I think you described it well, Barbara. It's fine.
Yeah. And so our hope is that, so if you have, I'm just going to make this up because I don't know, but let's say the 200 block of Dudley has regulated parking right now, and the 300 block of Dudley has regulated parking right now, and for some reason, that's, you live in the 200 block and your block is always parked up, you can now park in the 300 block if there's space. So you could always go to the 400 or 500 block, but maybe you didn't want to go that far and you're like looking at 300 block, which is empty, and going, why can't I park there? It's not fair. We're hoping this will ease some of that and maybe stop some of the spillover to adjacent unregulated streets so that we don't have more people coming and saying, oh, we need a 2-hour zone now. Because we'd really like not to have more 2-hour zones.
Okay.
So anyway, so now.
All right, anyone else have questions?
See the mayor's hand right now.
Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead, Andrew.
So you said you're going to come back and give a little bit more of a presentation or more explanation. I'm interested in the overnight parking, which is the one that I can just foresee a lot of complications. There could be people who have college kids who come home who don't have don't have stickers on their car, or they have all of a sudden maybe somebody drinks too much and they have to stay over last minute, at a friend's house rather than drive, or they parked in the neighborhoods and they walked to the Greeks and then they had too much to drink and they don't want to drive home. They want to, leave their car where it is. I just see a number of situations where it could come up kind of without pre-planning. And if we could address that at the time, I think these are issues that are going to become issues if we don't, figure out how to deal with them ahead of time.
Exactly.
Yes, and those are issues that we still need to talk about.
Well, and some of them we've thought through,
Yeah.
and we have answers for that, but I think we should do that another time.
Right, yeah, we're working through those. Yeah, so you'll be hearing from us
We have
further.
answers now. We do have some answers.
Let's save it for another.
Yeah. Okay, so we talk about what we're proposing as a fee structure, and I'll start by saying that our current fee is $5 for a year, and you can get an unlimited number of permits. The cost to administer and enforce the permitting program is about $50,000. There's no way our current fee structure promotes that. We don't have 10,000 parking permits. So the fees need to be increased to cover more or all of the costs, however wherever we are. But we feel like there's just no way around that. So we took a look at what Nelson Nygaard proposed and thought we like this idea of having stepped up permit fees for second, third, fourth, something like that. So we took a look at that and came up with this schedule that we have, which is for your first permit, your annual fee would be whatever we decide the base rate to be. There's nothing over to the side.
Okay, never mind. Well, apparently there's, okay.
There's really, sorry, I didn't bother making the table narrower. We're proposing that for your first permit, you would pay the base rate, whatever we decide that is, if you have a driveway, and you'd pay 1/2 of the base rate if you don't have a driveway. And the second permit cost would be the base rate for everybody. The third permit cost would be 2 times the base rate, and the fourth permit would be 4 times the base rate. We chose a limit of 4 as a reasonable starting point. We're thinking, all right, a family that has, 2 adult drivers and 2 young adult drivers, kind of thing. Or, you know, someone who has a personal car and a business car, and then a couple other drivers in the household. And granted, all of this can be adjusted as we go through the program and see what, you know, the actual experience is. If we end up not having anybody applying for a fourth permit, maybe you only have a limit of 3. I don't know. We'll just have to see. I know Michelle is thinking, oh, what about driveways? Well, we talked about what we would do there, and we would ask residents to attest to whether they have a driveway or not. And not going to require proof for that. We've talked about having some kind of penalty for providing false information, just, you know, as a way to, you know, make sure that people know that they should tell you the truth. And so we will be talking with the solicitor a little more on that to see what we can do.
There are
Something
some
like a
shared
fi-
driveways between properties. You have to sort of figure out how people are supposed to characterize that.
Well,
Good point.
that's a good point. You know what, I guess that would depend on whether the shared driveway is big enough for both. Yeah, we'll have to add.
I think we give people the benefit of the doubt, that whatever if we have a shared driveway, you get the half rate.
Well, but I think we need, I think we should say
Be simpler.
something, yeah, that's a good point.
So we just need an additional category, shared driveways.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Well, we can talk about it.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. That's another one to talk about. Thank you, that's a very good point. So, the committee talked about what should we set the base rate at. And we decided that the base rate could be set at $50. And this is what it would look like if it was set at $50. So for your first permit, if you have a driveway, it'd be $50 a year. If you have no driveway, it'd be shared driveway, $25 a year. Second permit would be $50 a year, third permit $100 a year, and fourth permit $200 a year. Just to give you a little context, Philadelphia charges $35 for the first permit, $35 a year, $50 a year for the second permit, $75 a year for the third permit, and $100 a year for the fourth permit. Lower Merion charges $20 a year for both the first and second permit and doesn't appear to allow any more than that. We took a look to also trying to get a sense of what is the cost of parking in the marketplace around here. And I called around to the various apartment complexes that have garages or outdoor parking lots. The cost for garages range from $100 a month, not a year, a month, to $165 a month. And the outdoor lots range from $0 to $60 a month. So what we're proposing here is by no means anywhere near close to what market rates would be, not that we would suggest that, but just to give you a sense of context of how that would look if we decided to set the base rate at $50. So that's, you know, food for thought as we go down the road to decide, because it'll be council's decision on that amount.
But my concern isn't with the base rate. I think that's a very reasonable base rate. It's a reasonable price for parking. The problem is not everybody is on a permitted street or permitted block of a street. And so if we don't change that, what happens is the people down the next block are looking at me who can park for free in front of my house. And there's no difference. In fact, Marble probably should be permitted, but it isn't. And theirs is, and they have to pay $50 or $25 or $50, and I have to pay nothing. And when it's only $5, it doesn't make me feel that annoyed, but when it's that, I think people are going to feel like, well, that's not fair. And I'm not sure that it's a good idea to raise the rate without working towards having everybody in some kind of permanent parking zone first. Just because I think it will raise a lot higher.
Well, and that was something the committee talked a lot about. Should we apply a new program to the entire borough, or should we take it in 2 phases? And there was honestly a lot of conversation about that. And the thinking was that if we started with the currently regulated streets, we would have a chance to see, was there anything that really needed to be tweaked before we rolled it out to everyone?
How are we going to determine if there's things that need to be tweaked?
We'll see what happens.
I mean, how are we going to...
Or,
Rob?
Yeah, just to Bill's point, we talked about a pretty quick phase out, so it could be a staggered start like Barbara's describing, but the kind of full rollout could come within a few months of the initial phase.
Okay.
We would certainly hope.
All right, so the goal is to roll it out quickly. It's not like
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
wait a year and then find out.
Hopefully
I
not.
think that's, because I do think people will start to get rid of it.
Yeah.
So my suggestion, I'll take the other side here. I mean, I should clarify that I do live on a street that, has no parking requirements, but it has no issue either. I mean, the street is pretty empty, mostly because people have driveways. But the reason that we have this in place is because the residents requested it. I mean, we didn't put this in just because the borough likes to manage parking on residential streets. It's because people want it in order so they can park near their house. There needs to be a regulation in place to free up spaces around people's houses. And that is an expense to the borough. I mean, it is a way to manage that is to charge for parking. Whereas in other parts of the borough, there is no problem. There's no reason for the borough to step in and manage it because there is no parking problem. I think the parking survey showed that in a lot of the borough, there really is no issue.
Hardly any districts.
Yeah.
And just to add to that perspective, most of the regulated parking are on blocks that have either fewer driveways or no driveways. And by giving free parking to those residents, we're almost artificially changing the economics of housing unintentionally. People who buy homes with driveways and plenty of place to park 4 cars pay for that luxury. If we provide free parking to people who have no driveways, we're actually creating a really strange
I
housing
don't think
and
anybody's
economy.
suggesting we should.
No, I know, but no, I'm not arguing that.
Yeah, okay. No, I mean, I wasn't either.
I'm not arguing that at all. I'm just adding additional thinking about why the regulation of parking in this instance, and in a limited way, is reasonable, without rolling it out to the full borough. Because many people in the larger borough that have unregulated parking already have large driveways and the accommodations for more than a few cars. So they're already paying for that luxury because they bought the land and the home that could park the car.
Then they won't buy a street permit.
They don't,
That's not a problem.
Well, that's not a problem.
Right.
It's not a problem.
But there are plenty of people like me who live on blocks where there is a parking problem and I don't have to buy a permit.
Yes, maybe your street needs to be regulated.
Yeah, I think it does.
I mean, the solution is to regulate that.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, I would argue against planning to roll this out to the entire borough. I think at least that needs further discussion. I don't think we can commit at this point.
Fred, if I could hop in too. I am in a 2-hour zone and I don't have a driveway. And Michelle, I have to go back to, so we're charging some folks potentially, what do we have here? $400 to park their family cars, where the block behind me would pay nothing, right? If we were a family of 4 cars. I do, if you're rolling this out within a couple of months, then that makes a little bit more sense. But this is a hefty price for folks. Don't have a driveway where it's not equitable. Again, I think the difference when it was $5 or $20, I don't think the comparison of a market rate makes a lot of sense for a residential street permit. So I guess I'm just saying, so if I am on a house in a 2-hour zone without a driveway, I do not have free parking ever. That is not a public service. That feels like you should at least get 1 car at no cost. Then additional from that, there's some gradient pay scale. But I think to come out of the gates at $25 a car, then $50 to $100 to $200 for only some folks that are already on congested problem streets, just feels really unequitable to me.
All right, Bob.
So Cindy, I think you're making a good point, but I also think it's important to consider that it's costing the borough $50,000 to regulate parking. That $50,000 is a cost that's being shared by all the taxpayers. So people are paying taxes to provide a service to people, to provide a parking regulating service to people who are paying nothing, very little for it. You know, so is that fair? Is that doable? And
Well, I guess I would go back to say, is the street a public commodity? And if the answer is yes, then everyone contributes to that. And I would lower those fees and do it across the borough. And if you're doing it, stagnating it, then I would go streets A to C, start their permits in January, D to E in February, and I would roll it out that way. I would do a distributive parking payment here, rather than kind of penalize those of us who already absorb the most congestion and traffic. Again, I'm using Iona as an example, but yeah, this is a substantial amount of money, that's for sure.
So let me also ask why the rates that were picked. So you quoted rates from Lower Merion and from Philly, which were significantly lower, right? So, well, 35 versus 50
Yeah.
for Philly, but the rates didn't go up quite as high for Philly?
No, they didn't go up to, no, they were $75 for the third permit, and we were saying 100, and they were $100 for the fourth permit instead of 200, and yeah, so it doesn't have to step up that much either. But, you know, this was just, this is what we said, you know, if you set it at 50, this is what you would get, you know, because we wanted you to see some numbers. And the reason I provided the market rates was not to say that we should be at market rates, but was just to give everybody a sense of this, you know, that parking has a real value, and we're not even getting anywhere near close to what that value is. And as Bob said, you know, this program costs $50,000 out of the budget every year to administer and enforce it, and right now we're hardly getting anything from permit fees for that. So if council decides that's fine, we want every taxpayer to be paying towards that regulation, that's fine. But then the other way to go is to say, no, we'd like to have people pay for what they're using. And that would
Barbara, how many permits do we have? How many permits have we issued?
So here's the problem with that question, and going to, I think, a question that I may have heard Michelle ask about, like, what sort of data do we plan to have on this? Right now, I mean, there's an old adage, you know, when it comes to statistical analysis of garbage in, garbage out. And the challenge for the borough is because, for whatever reason, since time immemorial, the borough has not enforced the annual renewal for these permits, which we would want to do as part of the new program. Our permit database, I mean, is littered with, you know, permits where I couldn't tell you if they're active or not, you know, and given as well that we've only, with our changes in staffing and all that, and COVID and everything like that, have only recently really begun consistently enforcing the 2-hour zones again, which suddenly led to a bunch of people who lost their stickers coming in to get new ones. I honestly can't tell you how accurate our data is to make any statements or justifications because of all those factors. But if we had a clean start of sorts, and basically I think you know, what was described with the alphabetical order on streets for rollout is pretty much what Michelle Carroll had proposed to the parking committee. We could actually get data that's relevant and timely in terms of these are the streets where people have, you know, purchased regulating parking. This is the number, you know, this is the demand on each street for it. I mean, we do know, again, enforcement has been kind of, you know, has been what it's been until recently. You know, where tickets are issued. So we do have data, you know, we'll continue to get data on this is where tickets are issued for regulated parking. And then we'll, you know, with the new system, with the new clean start with residential parking permits, we'll have actual data on what the demand for those permits are.
I just like, Cindy, I'd like you to consider, and I hope other council members will consider the perspective that the roadways and the right-of-ways in the borough are some of our most valuable open space. And that open space has significant value to bikers, to walkers, to people who enjoy the outdoors. And, you know, and I think anyone who lives on a block where they don't want people parking up their street can appreciate that when there are additional cars on the block, it creates a it creates additional congestion. And I've heard many times people talk about how much they dislike the congestion on our streets. The roadway itself has a value, and the space has a value to kids who want to play basketball, to people who want to ride bikes, to pedestrians. And by not charging actually adequately for additional vehicles to park on our streets, we're actually taxing everybody more. We're taxing the quality of the air, the quality of the environment, with just accommodating automobiles, for storing automobies. And
I'm not, yeah, I know that.
I just finished my thought. I believe you agree with me. I'm just asking you to consider this thought. The thought I want to complete is just that many people choose not, many people in my family, and maybe in your family, would choose not to live in Narberth because like they want a 3-car garage. Maybe they have 3 Humvees, so they have a collection of cars. Or maybe they're just a 4-car family, so they choose to go live somewhere where they can buy a home and a driveway and a place to park all those cars. They may not choose to live in Narberth. When you choose to live in Narberth, you choose a certain set of conditions under which you may park a car. And that includes competing for that same roadway space with bicyclists, walkers, and other people who enjoy the outside and nature. And I think it's time that we set the value of that resource appropriately for the storage of cars.
Just to clarify, you don't have to sell me on that. I'm just thinking of my street, which I think is one of the most, is a picture of some of the most aggressive gentrification. So I'm thinking of NARBs that have lived here for 5 decades and bought houses for $12,000 and don't have a driveway, are now going to spend $200 a year to park their cars, versus the house at the end of the street that the person is going to pay $1.5 million, and it's not a problem, So they'll park 1 car in their driveway and 2 on the street because writing a couple $100 check for parking is not an issue. This is a lot of money. Again, I support a fee structure, but I do think there should be some sensitivity to the fact that there are existing neighbors that have perhaps 2 cars in a family, do not have a driveway, and this is a financial burden that you are not equally distributing across the borough. And let the public respond to this. I mean, again, I'm only applying my own street and scenario. I wish neighbors that could park 4 cars in their driveway would just do it out of altruism. Perhaps this will motivate them, or perhaps they have the means that it doesn't really matter. They'll write a check for a couple $100 each year and continue to not have to back out of the driveway.
Well, in fairness, if you have 2 cars in their driveway, it's $75 a year, not $200 or $400.
Right, exactly. That's what. Yeah, I don't think it's $400 unless you have 4 cars.
I don't have any issue with the base rates or the rates that you're contemplating. And to be honest, I will share the experience of the citizen-based, which I know you probably watched the videos and the notes. I mean, this was a representative group of folks who lived all over the boroughs, and they all agreed on raising the rate from $5 a year. Some people were I would say the average range was about here. I think there were people who were like 100, there were people who were like 20. But I mean, I think you're right in the sweet spot where those people were, and people also agree with the idea that if you don't have a driveway, maybe there should be differential pricing. And the reason it didn't come out is because there was enough consideration that it would be too hard to establish. And that was really like, you can't establish that that's administratively too hard. Right. But otherwise, but in principle, everyone agreed with that and thought that it was fair and equitable, and also agreed with increasing the rates with additional cars. So I don't have a problem with that. I would like to request that you just, if you can give a better or more, to go back and try to give a more considered explanation of why we don't move to 3 zones, which I think frankly was an elegant and a good and a simple solution. We will thank ourselves for not trying to roll this out piecemeal with all the additional burdens of putting up signs and moving signs and changing things. I hear what you're saying. People will all crowd to park around the train station, but not really, because zone 1, who's going to drive 2 blocks to park next to the train station? Nobody. You can't park in zone 1 from zone 3 where you might actually do that, right? Downtown is metered. Maybe more metered parking to protect that business parking. But who's gonna like the way this is laid out, I don't really see those risks materializing. So I just would like, I know we're getting long. I would love for you to go back, because I'm sure you gave a lot of thought and help me understand the reasoning, because
Maybe if we rethink it, change our minds. I think it's a good.
Yeah, it's worth talking about, but we did talk about it a lot, to be fair.
I'm hearing a lot of the same kind of issues being raised. So I think price and zones are the two big concerns.
And price is really going to be up to council to
decide. And whether it goes to everybody, maybe we can look at what we think will recoup the 50,000, what we think is going to be the level that will allow us to recoup the current.
But that's hard to know, because we don't know how many people are going to apply for permits. Now, there was a presentation at a May 2019 Public Safety Committee meeting about a possible new parking program that really didn't go anywhere other than to add some rules around guest passes. But at that, the former borough manager had the same comments that you did, that we don't really know how many permits we have that are actually, being used right now. But their best guess was that there might be 800 permits under the new program. So even 800 at $50 is not, doesn't, even, let's say people, I don't know, it's still, it doesn't, it's just not going to get you there.
Point of clarification on the numbers. Does that 50,000 include meter revenue or just permit?
No, this is just for permitting.
But the expense is 50,000.
The expense is just for the permitting side. It's for the administration and enforcement of the permitting program, okay. Not for the parking meters.
Okay, I didn't understand that.
Yeah, no, it was
Thank you.
Yeah, just that by itself. Yeah, we asked to have those things all separated, so.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and so as we have a lot on the agenda.
Yes,
so
we do. Sorry.
We've got, no, it's fine. We need to have this discussion at some point, and I want to make clear to members of the public that we are not on the verge of making these changes. These are being,
Still got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, these are not yet in a concrete form that we are going to vote on.
No.
So,
Thank you, by the way. This is really complicated.
It's important.
It's way more complicated than I ever imagined.
It's been years that the borough has been considering this. It's good to have it in a more concise form so we can actually,
Yes.
And we can understand
discuss
why
a change.
no one's been able to change it
Yes.
before.
Yeah.
Take
Yes. We're like, oh, no wonder we don't have
All right, folks.
answer.
Need to move on.
Yes.
Thank you, though. Next item is streetery safety and aesthetic guidelines. So these are two issues that are in two different committees. I don't know, Samantha?
So, yes, as Council President mentioned, and as the memo from our infrastructure chair, Michelle mentions, when we originally conceived this idea, the safety aspect was delegated to the Public Health and Safety Committee, and the aesthetic component was delegated to the Infrastructure Committee. And I'll start with, and I guess what I mean by that, the delineation in my mind was you have an outside barrier, and then you have, whatever, a business decides to put within that barrier. And so what Public Health and Safety came up with is, what should that outside barrier be? Whereas the job of infrastructure was more to say, what kind of rules and regulations do we want to put in terms of aesthetics only on what is inside of that? Because our existing ordinance, I felt, does a pretty good job covering the safety aspects of what goes inside the box, so to speak. So in terms of the outside barrier, where Public Health and Safety ended up with thankfully some input from Michelle, as well as from Chief Gallagher and our Public Works Manager, was that really the only safe barrier is a water-filled jersey barrier. Now that being said, giving a little bit of thought to aesthetic, because we have water-filled jersey barriers all over the borough right now, and that's honestly what kind of sparked me to even start looking at this, was driving through the borough and being like, oh, that's not really what Narberth is. So again, I thought it was a great suggestion from Michelle, was there's a diagram, actually let me share my screen, because there's a really great diagram in here. see if this closes up Zoom or not. Yeah, it always wants to do that. It's all right, I'm getting better at this. I think I know what I need to do. All right, so can people on Zoom, can someone on council or the mayor confirm you can? Okay, thank you, Rob. All right, so in the top left here, you have kind of like what we have going on right now. But the proposal that public health and safety ended up recommending in favor of is you'd ultimately put, these sort of cedar planks as well as some vegetation on top of it, and you go from this, what we have right now to something, more like this that, continues to maintain safety while, doing a better job portraying the character of Narberth that I think we want to put out there for the public. When it comes to this barrier, my position would be, I hate when the state or federal government hands down what's called an unfunded mandate onto the borough. So in the case of this particular barrier, to ensure consistency and so our businesses don't feel like we're handing down an unfunded mandate on them, it would be my proposal that the borough would actually set up these barriers. We've already paid for and provided the water-filled jersey barriers to the businesses with outdoor dining. So it would be my recommendation that we would then take on the responsibility of converting those jersey barriers to this design if Borough Council wants to go in that direction. So that's the first component.
So let's pause here.
Sure.
Rob, do you have anything more to add about the discussion here?
No, I think the manager summed it up. That basically public health and safety was satisfied with the safety requirement, and then kind of handed it over to Michelle's committee, and grateful to Michelle's work.
Right.
How would these be manufactured?
So that's a question. I'll admit, I was, with my current workload and just generally projects like this, I prefer to go one step at a time. I was waiting on council to approve it. I feel very confident that it can be figured out. If it can't be figured out, I'll come back and let council know. But I'm confident that
the cost isn't a related question.
It can be, but it could be cheap.
And the look.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we're just going to stipulate that they're going to be beautiful and well made and not too expensive, like, okay, I'm good. But I'm asking.
My sense is we should cost it out. And we should consider, like, when you think you were going to have Kevin do this, I don't know.
Yeah, I was actually.
Consider maybe the backside replacing with plywood that doesn't face the street, like a ton of wood versus cedar slabs.
Sure.
Because it's not going to be cheap.
So as I've kind of admitted, and I think the public and council have seen over the last year, while I have many talents, construction is far from one of them. But thankfully, the borough has a very capable and qualified and state-certified building inspector, who I feel would be very qualified, to make make a schematic for this for us that we could then take around to contractors and find a contractor who is qualified and capable of then doing this work.
All right. So
What software was this made? They were
All
made
right.
by, software.
Okay.
I just like,
So bring us a
these are
couple.
going to be all over town. I mean, I'd like to know what the designs will be. Are they all going to be the same? Are they going to be variations? I mean, there's a lot of potential for this, and I don't know. I feel like you're asking us just to agree that this is done.
Well, we'll ask for a cost. Bring us a price. I think we like the idea, but we need more information.
No, I agree, Bob, that this is
You're right.
just a concept.
Yeah.
It's not really like a spec'd out design. Somebody needs to spec it out.
It has to. It's what it is. There's a big gap between this drawing, which is done in a piece of software, and the thing. And I just would like to know the thing before I say, yes, let's do it, because otherwise they'll be all over town and we'll be like,
But
no, I'm
you-
making my point.
But you agree in principle that.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's all.
And
That's
I-
really all.
Can I just make sure I understood? I thought you were suggesting that they all be the same.
That is what I'm
Yeah, so
suggesting.
Bob was saying, would they be? And I thought we said they would, so.
Well, so yeah, I mean, it's all devil's in the details, that's all.
I know, but I just was like that.
Okay, I think we're clear here.
Me too.
All right, so The infrastructure committee then, took on, looking into what other places with street area aesthetic guidelines, such as the city of Philadelphia. And again, to her credit, Michelle put together this draft document for council. I added some additional comments that are found before the draft guidelines themselves for Borough Council to consider. And again, basically the goal of these guidelines were, in this part, businesses have a bit more leeway. So not everyone's going to look the same, but it is going to put some control over what happens and ensure a certain level of quality. Again, the sort of character and quality we want the borough to have in terms of these guidelines. Michelle, if you have any specific comments that you think council would be interested in, I mean, the guidelines are in the packet.
No, really, it's a whole lot of stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't really know who. I guess my only comment is, how does this then get moved forward? Like, this is too much for like we can't sit here and discuss all these in a meeting. It's like, did anybody even look at this and think, I'm not bothering with this, because it's a lot. And so do we just want to sort of approve it in principle and move it on to like the office to do what you see fit with it? I mean, I'm fine with that.
So I might ask some of the businesses that are affected to have a look at this and see if there's anything that they say. I mean, not, the safety provisions are one thing, but these are kind of more optional, I would say. So if they see something that they think is going to completely mess with their plans, they should let us know.
That's a good
and we can
idea.
consider it.
Yeah, and something the infrastructure committee did discuss as part of drafting this was what sort of outdoor dining is currently provided by our businesses, and did try to be respectful from that, but we're not the actual businesses. So yeah, we could certainly circulate it to the businesses that would be directly affected for any comment.
Perfect.
Only thing I was going to say is, in terms of moving it forward, is once we have guidelines, all I need really is council to say we're good with this, and then staff can actually start, enforcing and implementing it. In terms of that implementation, we currently have received a batch of permit applications for outdoor dining from our businesses. Those permits have a duration of 6 months once issued. So my thought was we would issue, our current round of permits that have been applied for without these guidelines, and then businesses, have a chance to comment and be aware of this. So they effectively would have 6 months, to prepare for their next permit application where these guidelines then would be in place.
Is that, Barbara, sorry.
That's okay. So my question. So this says draft guidelines for streeteries and supplemental guidelines for outdoor dining. Now I have to admit I have not paid a whole lot of attention to the first guidelines for outdoor dining. So is this in addition to something that already exists, I guess? So I mean, it looks to me like...
Yeah, because things like heating aren't really limited to streeteries. I assume you'd want that to go, it could be applicable to sidewalk dining or the off-street tents and every area that's not just a streetery.
So this is intended to build on the ordinance that council passed at the end of last year, making outdoor dining permanent.
Okay, because, it does talk about streetery as a semi-permanent enhancement under Article 5, outdoor dining. So I assume that's an ordinance.
That's right, that's the
And
ordinance council
I
passed.
apologize for not spending a lot of time trying to figure that out, but I had this sort of I'm reading this and just kind of scanning at a high level saying, okay, yeah, all right, I'm going to trust that, our, someone, an engineer that we have, or someone would have looked at this and said, yeah, these are the right safety requirements, the height of things, that kind of stuff. But I had that thought, is are there some things in here that are applied to streeteries that should also apply to outdoor dining? But I didn't think so. But then I get down to this part where Section 2, umbrellas and tents, and I said, wait, is that just for outdoor dining areas? And then you have Section 3, heating. So I had a little, I didn't know how this all fit into what we already had. So, but it sounds like that's going to be ironed out when this is incorporated into wherever. Does this need to go in the ordinance, or?
So I did make a note just to confirm that with John Walco, whether or not it would need to be an ordinance or not.
Okay.
But to your point about the engineer, and sorry, I know Cindy has her hand raised as well, is the borough engineer attends pretty much all the infrastructure meetings, so he's been a part of all these conversations.
Yeah, that's what I figured. So I was like, I'm comfortable with all those things because I don't know what they should be.
Cindy?
Can I just ask, I do see a provision under here, F, with support posts. I think the only business who actually kind of built something and invested in more of a semi-permanent structure would be the Greeks. That's a really beautiful structure that I would hate to ask them to kind of retrofit. Is there a way that we could approve that structure and then just incorporate the next spot with these new regulations and the covering over the Jersey barrier?
I think that their existing structure complies with this, most likely. Their
Okay.
Their platform, however, probably doesn't because it's not flush with the sidewalk, so it would not be ADA accessible. But I'm pretty sure that their structure does.
I don't know where you landed on this.
But it's a good point, Fred, to ask them. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I don't know where you landed on this, but there was, at one point there was a debate about whether the support posts for the lights needed to be wood or that they could be PVC.
I think what we talked about in this committee was saying that they could be PVC if you put some kind of decorative, like
Okay.
either lumber cover. And
Well,
then
that's the only area where they're non-compliant right now.
The side thing is
Right,
PVC.
yeah.
They'd have to I put it
They have
here
no
just
problem
because,
with that.
I mean, maybe we could consider alternative decorative covers on a case-by-case basis as well. Like maybe, I don't know. We're gonna have
Let's get
yes.
feedback from them.
Yeah.
and see if
Well, it's
What they
ultimately,
say.
if council moves forward with it, as part of the permit approval process, it's ultimately going to be me and Kevin who are, ensuring that people comply with it.
Thank you for this, because I cannot think of, we have nowhere to go but up from these Jersey barriers. And you see communities who have figured this out 2 years ago. So I am glad we are finally moving to these beautiful aesthetics here in Narberth. So thank you, infrastructure and office.
Yeah. Okay.
All righty.
Okay, moving.
Okay, I see a lot of consensus on these guidelines. So let's move on to the proposal for a master park planning ad hoc committee. Do you want to take this one, Michelle, or Samantha?
Yeah. So it was brought to my attention that Parks and Rec had submitted materials to the borough a few years back in terms of, devising a strategy for long-term park planning. And in that document, it speaks to a recommendation for the creation of a ad hoc committee to handle master park planning. And it specifies certain representatives to be part of that committee. In addition to that, in the recent conversations at Parks and Rec regarding master park planning, and the presentation that they saw from HRG regarding it, there was some concern, it sounded like, from certain members of the committee regarding, the sort of time commitment that will be required to, to do this. And as we've seen with the parking ad hoc committee, for example, that committee's been meeting, twice a month since October. And based on my own experience, having very recently done a master park plan in my last position, it does require a pretty intensive meeting schedule, as well as public, as well as all the public meetings. I mean, all the parking meetings are public, but like the sort of meetings we've been doing with the town hall, with the town square. Boy, we're getting near 10 o'clock here. Are the sort of meetings as well you're generally going to do as part of a master park planning process. So to be fair to the time of volunteers and everyone else involved, and ensure adequate time can be spent on this, and given that the Parks and Rec Committee had previously asked for the borough to consider doing it this way, that's why I thought it might be better to bring this, bring this concept to council for consideration.
So as the person who wrote that report for the, at the time, the rec board, I'm very familiar with this recommendation. It came from the chair at the time, Maureen O'Leary, who had experience with the way the school board did these kinds of projects, and she felt that this was going to be the best way to move forward and committee agreed. So I think it's great that we've found that recommendation at the time when we are moving on master park planning.
It's a thoughtful recommendation because they clearly when you guys made this, you were thinking beyond just the layout of the park, but fundraising, grant writing, getting professionals, and so you came up with a pretty representative group. But the recommendations for a representative from the Parks and Recreation Board, obviously, from the Planning Commission, from the now Infrastructure Committee, from Finance Administration, from the Athletic Association, from the Shade Tree Commission. And I guess my question to everybody here is, does that sound like the right group? Does it sound like there's anybody left out that should be, or that we don't need?
Can you repeat it just one more time?
Yeah, it says they've got the Parks and Recreation Board, the Planning Commission, the Infrastructure Committee, Finance and Administration, the Narberth Athletic Association, and the Shade Tree Commission.
The only other one, oh, sorry.
The one suggestion I had is that in selecting someone from Parks and Recreation, that we might want to consider someone who is not a Narberth Athletic Association affiliated person, if we're going to also have a Narberth Athletic Association affiliated person.
They don't get adequate representation that way.
Yeah, exactly, so that we're getting a broader category.
And I'd recommend public health and safety, since the environment is like sort of the primary mandate of that commission.
Yes.
Let's say two council people. Well,
Michelle, can I also suggest, I don't know how we do this, but I think a senior member of our community, we often design with kids in mind, and I would love to have, whether it be a medical professional or a senior citizen, come and really bring a different lens or perspective to the planning. And I don't know if that's New Horizons. I don't know if we just ask for a citizen volunteer or someone in that space, but I think we should intentionally get someone thinking outside of the traditional park age and children.
I think that makes sense. Do we want to make that a specific spot, or just seek to recruit somebody who's already in one of these other organizations who fills that role? Or, I mean, I'd assume that this working group would do significant outreach as well, but it can't hurt to have that voice represented full-time at the table either. So,
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And when I did the master park plan before, there were two groups of people. There was the steering committee, which I think is almost what this ad hoc, which is what this ad hoc committee would be. And then there were people identified as key stakeholders. And so the way it worked was, the ad hoc committee, the steering committee would have these frequent meetings to actually work really intensely on the plan. And then key stakeholders would be brought in, would be asked to attend some of the meetings, would be asked for input, would be done interviews with, to get their perspective, as opposed to actually being a member of the group writing the plan.
Fab, that's great. Thank you.
I mean, you didn't state this explicitly, although I didn't see the full report, but I mean, it's my guess that this group that you're going to form is going to have outside help. It's going to have professional help to do this. Right. So just remember that that's another component of this group, is that they don't have to do everything themselves.
Oh, yeah, and I assume the administration would be represented. Literally. Right, so yeah. Right. No, I mean.
But you have like a landscape architect.
Right. Sure.
Or planner. Such a planner, whatever.
So I'm hearing a lot of general consensus that
There's still a suggestion on the table about me to include a Parks representative, so if there's really one representative from each of the standing committees. Does that seem like too much council voice at the table, or does it seem?
If it's too much council, I would just recommend not doing it by committee, just say like have the council leadership appoint 2 council member representatives.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was in the past when there were 7 committees, there were specific committees that were picked.
Yeah, just have.
Two council people?
Yeah.
And then, sorry to interrupt, but the mayor had her hand raised.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Andrea.
I just want to add, as just as an elderly person, I would also get a representative from the disabled community to add someone like Brooke or somebody else from Get Cafe who could give input as to how the park could be accessible to people from the disabled community.
Right, but there's a distinction between who's on the committee and who you bring in periodically.
Right. So this would be like an adjunct person to bring on. So
Key stakeholder.
Okay. Key stakeholder. Thanks. Okay.
So you suggested, Samantha, that we should have council leadership appoint 2 council representatives, and we should find out who's interested. A similar question pertains to appointing representatives from these other organizations, whether it might make sense, because, I mean, typically when we do appointments, we're sort of putting it out, probably going to put it out and we take, but in this case, we're looking for representatives from particular boards. Does it make sense for council leadership to reach out, maybe even attend a meeting of the board, or figure out some way, maybe. Are you comfortable with council leadership finding out who is interested from the board and then having council make a recommendation? How should we do that?
From the Parks and Rec Board.
Samantha has a better idea.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily need to maybe extrapolate what, Barbara said about making sure that like the Parks and Rec person, and NAA, the separation there and all that. And that's why I think it's probably going to be better for council to be more involved, is making sure that all the right, making sure council in general appoints the members of committees, and obviously, council doesn't want to appoint someone who doesn't want to do it.
Yeah.
But I also think it behooves council to make sure when we're talking about like different bodies, to make sure that we're bringing a variety of perspective to it, as we've already been talking about.
Yeah.
So I would suggest basically, we let the committees know to let us, in this case, Shade Tree Commission and Parks and Rec and NAA, to
Planning
like,
commission too, right?
Planning.
Vis-a-vis their committee, in other words, like the planning commission I'll take, because it's less controversial maybe. Are they coming there representing their point of view as with their experience, or are they, somehow representing the point of view of the entire planning commission?
I would say that they are, that's
a tricky question.
That's a tricky question. I would say that they are recommending, I would say they're bringing their point of view. Like, I don't necessarily expect with all these different people for each of them to have to say like, oh, I have to go back and talk to this group about it.
But I think that there should be a clear expectation that they are expected to report to that group and to take feedback and then relay it.
Yeah.
Like, I think they should be a liaison as well.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, that's right. So they don't need consent. They don't necessarily have to before they say every word, have to check with 10 people. But
right, they should be
keep
keeping
them
those
informed.
bodies.
Keeping them in the loop. Okay, that sounds good.
In terms of timing, that's it's one question. I mean, is this something where, what time frame do you feel like we need to be thinking about? I mean, there are things that, I know that where we are with our planning projects, what is your perspective now? How quickly it makes sense to move forward with?
Yeah, so I'm torn in a few different directions on this. Number one is, which we'll get to in a minute, our planning budget for this year. Which may not have been a large enough number to accommodate everything we had originally talked about doing this year. Number two is the fact that, keeping in mind everything the borough is working on right now, and as well as its volunteer committees. And then, however, though, that's balanced against a third point of mine, which, I'm on recording as an infrastructure committee meeting of having said, we need to get this done, right now. Bear in mind, that was, back in October, I think.
And that's the right to change your mind.
Yeah, so, here's the challenge, is that I think we have great park resources here in the borough, and I think, with some, love and investment, they could be even better than what they are. And I'm so grateful to the people who already, between our public works and members of the community, who put time and effort into our parks, to make them, make them better and make them great places. In terms of grant funding, so there's two ways to look at this. One is you can get a grant to do master park planning. DCNR will pay up to 50% of the cost of it. The other way to look at it is you can get a grant to actually implement the master park plan, where again, DCNR will pay up to 50% of the construction costs. DCNR grants, as we found out with the recent Three Elmwood project, are due generally in early to mid-April of each year. So if we wanted to move full speed ahead, we would want to get a master park plan done in time for next year. If we wanted to do it without grant funding, which I think is probably viable, we would need to get it done by April of next year, which means we need to get started on it relatively soon. That being said, as much as I really want to see something happen there, I don't know how realistic that is given the time commitments of all these people who would need to be on this ad hoc committee. So if council wants to make it a priority, we could make something else a lower priority, but we can't make this a high priority with all our other high priorities right now, in my opinion.
Okay. So if we decided that we weren't going to get an implementation grant in by next April, we would just be starting this sometime like late this year or early next year. And if we're not in a hurry?
Yeah, I mean, if we were not in a hurry, then we would probably be looking at the April 2024 DCNR grant application, and would need to get it. And I think that's very, very, very doable. If that's our goal.
Well, how about you look into the timelines a little bit and you see, maybe, decide which you think is going to be more feasible or a wiser course.
We could put a grant in for planning services by next April.
Yeah.
That's a real slow walk, but we get more.
Yeah.
I mean, that could apply to DCNR in April of 2023 to do the master park plan. Well, the challenge if you do that, though, sorry, I'm kind of like thinking and talking in the middle of the meeting here, is that you're not going to know if you got the DCNR grant until October or November. So originally I was going to say, oh yeah, we do the planning grant in 2023, we get it done in time to do the implementation grant in 2024, but I don't, 6 months would be the lightning speed version of getting this done.
Why don't you think about logistics, Samantha, and come back to us at another meeting with,
Thank you.
having gone through this more.
And Fred, if I can just add too, I mean, we did put together a grant process, so we were really strategic in what we applied for. I think you should assume no one's going to meet over the summer at this point. So you're really starting this process in September. But I do think so we're not, so we're acting strategically and efficiently. We should also consider what other grants are on the horizon so we can appropriately map this out and kind of follow that and map out the procedure that we all agreed upon for grant applications.
Yeah, I'm not hearing a lot of urgency here, so I think let's look at the schedule and see what makes sense.
Yeah, I'll see what, and I'll admit I'm most familiar with the DCNR one, but I can certainly look at what other grants and their time frames out there and let council know.
All right, there is some urgency in moving through our agenda, unfortunately, so I apologize for the late hour, especially for our dedicated observers here. Let's move on. Are there any other comments on this ad hoc committee proposal? Okay. Let's move on to 7G, which is the Town Square project design team.
So, in council's packet are the 3 proposals that we received for the design team for the Town Square project. Myself and members of the Planning Commission, as well as Michelle, had an opportunity on April 7th to actually meet with the interested applicants over at what's now we're calling Town Square, to talk about the project and get to know them a little bit and them to get to know us. And the our Planning Commission on Monday night looked at these submissions. My understanding, Jim, throw something at me if I'm wrong about this, is that the Planning Commission has recommended that the borough move forward with Simone Collins. However, they would also be amenable to if we wanted to interview Dirk and Edson as well as Simone Collins. So looking at the information from the Planning Commission, having reviewed the applications, I would actually recommend to council that we go ahead and appoint Simone Collins for this position. The reasons for that are, in their application, they noted one of their employees who would be working on this project is actually one of the Temple students, who used to be one of the Temple students who did one of the submissions for designing it. So they have a lot of familiarity with the project already. Their offices are have pretty much always been located next to train stations, so they have a lot of familiarity already with transit-oriented projects. The grants that they mentioned in their application were specifically tied to this project, whereas I felt the other applications weren't quite as targeted and focused as theirs. In terms of cost, I like the fact they provided a not to exceed figure. So it may not end up being this number, but at least we have some budget certainty on their proposal. And that figure is $35,000. Looking at our planning budget, we budgeted $60,000. About $10,000, a little over $10,000 of that is our contract with Montgomery County Planning Commission, and about $5,000 of that has been spent on other planning services so far this year. So we do have $45,000 remaining in that budget. However, in the 2022 budget, that money was allocated not just for Town Square, but also for if we do decide to do anything or have any professional support for 201 Sabine planning, as well as Master Park planning. Given the discussion we just had about Master Park planning, I feel a little bit more comfortable that we may not need all of that funding for that this year. For active transportation planning, we're already working on getting the TCDI grant funding to cover that. So my recommendation to council is I think we can comfortably approve this expense, and if it does, turn out that it does end up being that $35,000, and/or we need funding for anything else planning related in excess of that, council could always then consider a budget amendment to cover it. But basically, I think we have the money to do it. I think Simone Collins is the best fit. I think our planning commission also felt that Simone Collins is the best fit for this project. So that's where we're at.
I agreed. I appreciated the summary that the Planning Commission gave to us. That was really helpful. They pointed out that the fees for Dirk and Ensign seemed low to the point of not quite understandable, and I agreed with them, and so that kind of was a little bit of a, I'm not sure I jump for them, but the thing that I really appreciated about Simone Collins is that they actually say in there, here's the people that are going to be working on this, and the last person they mention that one of their principals will be I think of as client relationship manager kind of thing, but then the other principal is going to serve as the quality control, quality assurance person, which from my career, that's what we always did, so that you had a peer looking at work to make sure that all the questions that should be answered were answered, and that all the questions that weren't even thought of were thought of and asked. And so I really appreciated that perspective that they had. It gave me a real level of comfort that they know how to approach projects like this. So.
And I'll point that we did put in a request from the county for funding for this, their recent recovery program. So there is a chance that we will receive county funding, although there was a lot of competition for the grant money, as it turns out. Nonetheless, there is a chance that we will receive grant funding for this. Any other comments on the suggestion to the Planning Commission for the firm whose name I forget? Simone Collins, thank you. Does anyone want to argue against appointing Simone Collins?
I'll just add that I did attend most of that planning commission meeting, and it was, the one observation I had is it's a little bit of an unusual process because you're discussing proposals in a public meeting, a recorded public meeting that the people who submitted the applications can listen to. So it's just, it's kind of an odd, I mean, I know we have to do it, but.
Yeah, I'll say this, I haven't had to do a fair number, you get used to it eventually.
Okay, that's great, that's right.
Okay, well, it seems like no one wants to, no one has any problems with appointing Simone
I think they
Collins.
made, I think the
Their
recommendations.
portfolio projects is so appropriate to notice. They've done so many like sort of small scale, but kind of urban plan, but landscape projects, and they've also done really large parks, and like it just seems like they understand the scale that we live in.
I was mainly extremely impressed with their incredibly detailed layout of the funding and grant process. I mean, like,
Yeah.
really understanding how many years you're talking about if it's a federally funded program, and that's.
So the one thing that I almost said at that meeting when they were thinking about extending the process is like, they want this person to come to the May 25th meeting. Right, but you have to get them under contract, I assume.
Right, yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know that there would even have been enough time to like start interviewing somebody else, because you don't just like, you know, just like send somebody a credit card or something. I mean, you'd have to go through a process with them, right?
Well, and I'll talk with the solicitor, but I mean, with the RFP process that we had, it was intended to cover a lot of those sort of situations.
So you could probably bring them on board fairly quickly?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm just asking really.
Yeah.
It makes me nervous because I know where I work. Like, you know, there'd be like a 2-month delay.
No. This is different.
So I think council agrees with the recommendation from planning commission. Ready to move forward?
Thank you.
Simone Collins. All right. Yeah, I very much enjoyed the presentation as well.
They continue to refer to her as Simone. Is that what they?
That's the way it was pronounced.
Oh.
I would never.
So it's not Simone, it's Simone.
Simone
Jim
Collins.
Mann.
Simone's a bad thing.
What the hell were they saying?
Yeah, it's like a sale of church offices. It gets you into
Simone.
levels of hell.
Oh, we don't want to do that.
No.
Simone, okay.
Okay, moving on.
Our apologies, Simone Collins, all right.
Okay.
I think somebody's waiting to be.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, it's the very last item on our presentation. It has the Wheels on Haverford recap.
So let me get this up on the screen here.
Well, I'm just waiting to see.
I thought you were just enjoying our presence.
Yeah, our lovely 85-degree.
It's quite a meeting.
You missed it at the beginning where I said, yeah, this is going to be long.
Yeah, Fred apologized,
I
yeah.
wanted to break out into Hello Kimberly song.
Please don't.
And so I'm very grateful, as we noted, that Kimberly's here with us tonight, and also Jean is on Zoom here with us. So, Kimberly, do you mind if I kind of like maybe take the lead, and then you and Jean are welcome to interrupt you wherever you like. All right, so I'm really appreciative of the support from Kimberly and Jean to help put together this presentation for council tonight. We took a look at the survey data from the Wheels on Haverford pilot to kind of put together a summary here for council and some recommendations for future action. So just to recap again for everyone let me get this out of the way. For everyone what the actual pilot was, it was a contraflow lane along with the shared travel lane on Haverford from Essex to Wynwood. It ran from November 24th to March 4th. We had the grand opening of it on December 1st that a lot of us here had a chance to attend. DVRPC was able to get some traffic data for us before the pilot started, and then for a little bit after the pilot started. And then the survey was ongoing for the entire length of the pilot. A few things were different from Wheels on Windsor. Other than providing some of the traffic data collection, DVRPC wasn't really involved in the design or management of it. The other big change different from Wheels on Windsor is basically once it was put in, it basically was, left as is for the duration of the pilot. Whereas my understanding from Kimberly and Jean and others is that with the Wheels on Windsor, we made tweaks and changes based on feedback as it went on. So here's a quick, the schematic that council had us all on approved real quick again of just what it actually was and entailed. I'm not going to really dwell on this because we saw it in action and saw what it was. So here's the data that DVRPC collected for us about what traffic was like on Haverford Ave before and after. As you see, the total number of vehicles is pretty consistent, so I feel good the data is representative of what traffic was like before and after. The thing that actually surprised me the most was the generally, only minor impact on vehicle speed. I was actually surprised to see that vehicles actually overall were going a little bit faster after the pilot as opposed to before it. My only explanation is maybe people were parking their cars more often when it was a parking lane than people were actually biking on it. And anecdotally, I'll report, everyone kind of saw the hay bales were impacted on a somewhat regular basis, which suggests to me as well that people weren't being as careful as they may have should have been while driving through there. The more encouraging note, however, is the bicycle counts that DVRPC collected before and after after the pilot. As you would expect, overall, biking before and after increased in every possible way, whether people were going westbound or eastbound. Understandably, there was, with doing the projected lane, again, I think the goal was to encourage biking, and I think we, accomplished that. The weather, was pretty consistent before and after as well, and there was a holiday in both periods too. So I think really the only variable that really changed in the data collection was the existence of the pilot. So again, I think this is good data that we collected.
Can I just also point out, Samantha, that the pilot was not during a fair weather biking time of year. So to see those increases when you're seeing temperatures in the 40s, where most people that don't bike year-round have stopped biking, is also something to keep in mind.
And the thing that was most impressive about the pilot, this section here of bike counts from Conway Avenue to Essex Avenue, you've had 106% increase in bikes involved in that. And again, I think that makes sense. There wasn't a contraflow lane before, so people really weren't allowed to do it. Some bicyclists still did, but obviously the existence of the contraflow lane brought it from 2 people, to 35 just in that 8-day period, and with the weather conditions that Kim mentioned. So I think that does show that the contraflow lane does make it more possible for people to bike who otherwise would not have biked in that area. So getting to the actual survey results, I think we got a pretty good survey response for an online survey, and given the size of the borough, we had a total of about 190 responses to the survey. As would generally be expected, the vast majority of respondents live or work in the borough, but not on Haverford Avenue. I think that fundamentally seems correct. How people usually travel east-west through Narberth. So, again, it was predominantly people who drive, a lot of people who walk, that was good to see, some bicyclists, and then an other, which our best guess was people who take public transit. It will be noted, though, that we do suspect that this survey was overrepresented by people who are interested in biking and walking, just given the fact that it was a survey in regards to a bike pilot. So, probably the maybe a little bit disappointing thing is the share of people driving to get through the area is probably higher than what the survey would suggest. And then a more specific question was asked if people go to work, school, or anywhere else on bicycle, and a large part of people said no, some said yes. Again, probably the thing to keep in mind, this yes is probably overrepresented given the nature of the pilot and survey. So why did people say that they don't do it? We did our best to take what were qualitative data and summarize it into 3 buckets. For anyone who's interested in the public or council, the full survey results were included as part of the packet. And the most common answers were in regards to safety and infrastructure. They either didn't have anywhere to go, whether it was by bike or any other means, or wherever they were going to travel they felt was too far to be able to reasonably bicycle it. We felt that looking at the pilot, its biggest goal was to address the safety infrastructure concern. So we'll have more to talk about that concern. Kind of going directly to that, would you consider biking more if there are permanent bike lanes? A third of people said yes, 2/3 of people said no. What I'll note with this question, that again we'll get into more in a minute, is when you ask people a question, permanent bike lanes, what do people think about when you say that? Are people thinking about just paint on a road with no protection from vehicles, or are they thinking about something more than that? So here we go. On-street bicycling can feel safe or stressful depending on how a street is designed. Which changes would you support to have safer bicycle facilities in Narberth? And I think it was really encouraging to see that, oh sorry, my dots did not line up here. The blue section is the only section of people who said don't change anything. And that was about 1/3 of respondents. So 2/3 of people who responded to the survey said we should at least do something, to make the borough more bicycle friendly. And it was kind of evenly split on how impactful the change that we should make. Before Wheels on Haverford, did you know what a contraflow bike lane was, and had you ever rode on one? Again, we took qualitative answers and kind of put them into these buckets here. As would kind of be expected, most people hadn't experienced a contraflow bike lane prior to the pilot. Would you like to see more pilots in Narberth? Now this question in hindsight can mean a lot of different things to different people, and it's evenly split in responses. Looking at how people generally responded to the survey, there were people who took the position that no, we need to do permanent things, not pilots. And there were people who took the position, no, I don't want to see anything more with bicycling go on in Narberth. So keep in mind of this no group, like I'd say it was about half and half between people who just want us to start doing permanent things and people who don't want us to see it do anything, which lines up a lot with this pie chart up here. And then, for the people who did say that they'd like to see more pilots, they asked for Narberth Avenue, the entire length of Haverford Avenue. It was interesting to see the number of people who said Windsor Avenue. Maybe they didn't live here, didn't know about the Windsor Avenue pilot we already did. And then I was pretty surprised to see Wynwood Ave and Montgomery Avenue, because those were streets that I would be myself, very leery of biking on. But maybe if the borough provided infrastructure, maybe it might be different.
Well, we don't have control over those streets, unfortunately. So I think Montgomery belongs to.
Marion, yeah. Wynwood Avenue, the borough does.
Oh.
Yeah, it's Wynwood Road that we don't.
Yeah, I think there were 1 or 2 people who did say Wynwood Road, but these were kind of like these were like the top 5 responses we got. Again, full data is available in the packet. We had responses all over the place about how to make the pilot better, including there was a segment of people, just to be fair and honest about the results, who expressed just a general opposition to biking, period. There were a number of people who had concerns about reducing parking in the borough, as we talked about a little bit earlier here tonight. And then there are people who talked about signage, as Kim mentioned, the time of year when the pilot's held. There are a lot of people who took this opportunity for this specific pilot to talk about the linkage with the existing trail at Thomas Wynn. There are a lot of people who spoke about, how the hay bales didn't really provide an adequate level of safety and security. There are a lot of people who noted the number of people who weren't biking but were in the contraflow lane. And then there were a handful of people who noted a request for bikes to go single file as opposed to getting outside of the pilot area and the road. So, speaking with Kimberly and Jean, this is kind of where we ended up on where we think the borough should go from here. First is designing an active transportation plan, and I think with some of the parking discussion we had earlier tonight, we talked about the value of our roads for multiple sort of parties to use. We've also spoke when we talked about applying for the TCDI grant about the importance of an active transportation plan. So I would say the borough has already taken a step towards that takeaway by applying for TCDI grant funding to implement an active transportation plan. And if we don't receive that grant funding, there are some other opportunities for grant funding for that I'd like us to then explore. As was noted in the comments from the survey, the intersection at Haverford and Wynwood, taking a look at how should that work in terms of pedestrian and bicycle access, in that zone, especially with the trail from Thomas Wynn ending in that area. Creating a backbone network on high-impact streets, which I'll have an image in a minute from our comprehensive plan that speaks to that. And then, developing an actual implementation and maintenance strategy for any of these improvements that we would want to make, led by a traffic engineer who has experience with complete streets and, of course, with public and staff and council input into that. So, one last thing before we get into the actual, bike routes our comprehensive plan proposes is, again, speaking to the different sort of bicyclists that are out there. So Kimberly, which one of these three categories would you consider yourself to be in?
The 1%. Yeah.
John, how about you? Put you on the spot.
I can't read it.
I'm sorry, you're experienced and confident, casual and somewhat confident, interested but concerned.
It's the top one, experienced and confident.
So, thankfully, we have a number of people in the borough who fall into this first category. I'll admit myself am probably in this interested but concerned category. So, for example, to bolster my street cred, my stepfather gave me an electric bike and I took it to an birthday on Saturday. I live over in Bella Kenwood, and you better believe I didn't take it on Montgomery Avenue. I took the back roads, if you will, from Bella Kenwood, through Avon Road over to Haverford and to the park. And again, I think that speaks to that's something I'm willing to do. And if there was infrastructure in place that made some of those other areas safer, again, someone like myself would probably do that. So when we think about design of bike infrastructure, while I'm certainly glad that we have these other two categories of people, in our community, I think we all would agree that to maximize participation, we need to design things for the interested but concerned population. And this chart, by the way, just the source came from, was it PennDOT or DVRPC last year who did the bike safety webinar? Do you remember, Kimberly?
DVRPC did one.
Yeah, so this is from DVRPC who collected this data. This wasn't just me and Kimberly and Jean making up numbers here.
Well, in Montgomery County, the bike Monco plan has that even higher, 77% untapped potential for curious but cautious or interested but concerned. So in our counties, that potential of people that are not on the road but are interested is even higher than 60.
And I think, to sanity check these numbers, again, in the survey, the questions before, we saw there were about a third of people in the borough who just weren't really interested in biking who responded to the survey. And then there were these chunks of people who said if you made it easier and safer, I would, consider doing it. So our last slide here, which I'll try to maybe zoom in a little bit, is from the borough's comprehensive plan and speaks to where it proposes, based on various other plans throughout the years, where we should have bike routes. And I think it corresponds pretty well with where people said they would like to see future pilots and future infrastructure. You have the entire length of Haverford, you have Wynwood, you have Windsor, and then you have these streets that then connect some of these other regional, bike paths, whether it's out, to some of these things at Lower Marion Township as proposed in their plans. So I think we already kind of have a plan in place for long-term biking in the borough. I think it's just maybe more of a matter of shifting the conversation maybe from pilots to saying what does, some permanent, improvements look like. And then again, this actually gets into, looks like I repeated the DVRPC data. This is the actual detailed data if you really want to get into the weeds, which I don't think is appropriate here for tonight. Kimberly or Jane, is there anything either of you would like to add?
I mean, this has been years and years in the making, right? Like Narberth, way back in 2006 with the open space plan, there were such progressive conversations happening at the table that weren't happening anywhere else in the region. And then just over the years, we've seen again and again, there are so many plans out there. There's the climate action plan, the comprehensive plan. There's lots of plans in place now. Even the parking study makes mention of how bikes can be used to alleviate parking burdens. So that partnered with the work that we've done with the cycling club, building what's called the human or the cultural infrastructure around bicycling, not just for fun, but for getting around. I think that the time has arrived that these pilots have done their job. To your point, Samantha, the pilots have done their job to demonstrate that there is, I think, a very meaningful interest in the community, like over 2/3. I was really surprised to see that number too. We've arrived at this point where I think that it would be interesting to see a conversation about, okay, now how do we move to the next step of making these actions permanent? So to just echo that point, I think it's really great. I will also echo that. I was very alarmed when I saw that the speed data captured folks going 55 to 60 miles per hour on Haverford, and that would explain why the hay bales kept getting taken out, which was really alarming, because hay bales could be people. So anyway, the time is now to slow cars down and make space for other road users.
Does Gene have anything?
Yeah, Jane, would you like to add anything?
No, I don't have anything to add. Samantha and Kimberly, you guys.
All right.
Thanks. All right.
So, I mean, I guess I heard a fair amount of anecdotal, and then I guess in the survey, comments about the separation between the bike lane and the traffic lane. And I've seen this elsewhere, and I don't know, what the best solution for that is. What they do in Philly, I think, is very weird, and those sticks, and then the parking lanes.
The flex bollards.
Yeah. I don't know. It doesn't look very good right now at this point, because those things are all knocked over. So I just don't know what's the sort of state of the art in doing that in a place that has snow.
I think the benefit of bringing in a professional that is highly skilled in complete streets and really has a background in bike and walk projects,
right?
As a specialty or whatever you want to call it. I really think that is the next step, but that's just my thought.
I agree with that, and I think the thing that's really exciting about the TCDI grant that we applied for is that DVRPC is going to directly oversee it. It's not like a lot of these grants, you just get whoever you want and they try to figure it out. But if we got this grant, we would have the resources of DVRPC, who's been so involved in our original pilot, And I feel very confident that whatever design professional they brought on board to do this work is absolutely going to be someone who would be the person to be able to authoritatively answer those sort of questions.
But are there solutions in a climate that has snow?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and so that's what I see as the path forward really, is if we can get that TCDI grant for an active transportation plan. One of the many things it'll tell us, we talked about doing a lot of other things with it, but not just, lines on a map here, it would actually tell us like what do these lines, how would we actually implement these lines?
And which in turn lets us get grant funding to implement the lines.
Exactly.
to move forward. So I know you've talked about a lot of plans. This is another plan, but nonetheless.
It's the last plan to actually get to doing it.
Yeah.
It's good.
Okay.
And then, like I said, if we don't end up getting that grant, then like I said, I do have some other ideas on how we can move forward in that way to make that happen.
Okay. I think it'd be exciting to move past the pilots.
Yeah. Yes, I agree.
Thank you, Kimberly, and thank you, Jean.
Yeah, thank you for your your work on this and your patience tonight.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
No problem.
All right. Next item is committee reports.
There's something
Well,
under
there's
action
no-
items. There's something here.
Oh, was there an action? It's not on the agenda, so I don't think we can act on it.
If there was, it's called, it was late on Friday, and I was,
Yeah, we can't actually act on something that's not on the agenda. So.
Very good. Good.
I mean, how far we've come in this borough. When I moved here, there were no agendas or minutes.
No, it's just that's an information.
yeah, sorry, that's it, yeah, sorry,
Oh,
that was,
that was
yeah, that's
You
it,
tell us
yeah, I
about
just
it.
dumped it in the wrong spot.
Oh, okay. I
That's
wondered
just-
about that because I
That's
thought
just
that
so
was submitted.
that's just so council and the public knows what we actually submitted to the county for our
Right,
recovery
just-
funding
just in the wrong
applications.
place. Okay.
Yeah, that's not something for.
All right.
It's already been done.
Excellent.
Infrastructure.
Committee reports, okay. I hardly have anything to say because we've covered everything at our meeting in great detail here. So I will only mention, we did discuss our Public Works Director's truck and snow equipment request in a lot of detail, and we're not ready to make it yet, but he's going to be interfacing with the EAC for some final recommendations on whether this electronic equipment didn't work. We approved the manager's request for library supplemental funding for ADA compliant entry. For an ADA compliant entry, and I believe you'll probably be bringing up a business meeting, Samantha. And then we approved a request for repaving and regrading the area behind 80 Windsor because there was a lot of water and ice buildup, and this also will work well with the stormwater management plans that are in the works. And that's really all we did. The other last item we had to table because we were running out of time, and I'm done.
Okay. Thanks. Finance administration.
I will be very brief. We have not met because the last two meetings I was in different time zones traveling from work, so I apologize, but please rest assured all bills were paid and the office was managing any financial issues. Information items, council, please don't forget we have our meet and greet tomorrow at NARB Art Month outside Sweet Mabel Greeks, or inside if it's pouring. Is it helpful, Samantha, Fred, tell me, do you want me to review quickly the categories that we put in for the economic development for the COVID recovery grant that FNA kind of coordinated? Or
So I would say at the, Cindy, just at the business meeting, council spent a little bit of time talking about that.
Perfect. So then I will just share with you an idea that we put in, not a project, for the COVID relief funds. This was in partnership with Montgomery County Office of Housing and Community Development, as well as a thought partner identified in the Narberth Civic Association, and a potential public-private partnership between Your Way Home. Just briefly, this we didn't even identify a price or a cost to this grant. Rather, it was just an idea for a feasibility study that would take place over the next year that would look at how would we address access to housing, particularly rental properties and apartment complexes. for those of you who don't know, or for the public's reference, aside from first, last month, and a security deposit rent for an apartment, you also, these apartment and management corporations look at this, 3-time your income to rent ratio. And if folks don't qualify for that, they need to have someone co-sign for them. If their credit score is not high or adequate enough, you need to have someone co-sign for them. So what we are proposing is looking at how would Narberth create a nonprofit that would essentially become a legal entity that could co-sign for folks who otherwise may not be able to live in our community because they don't meet the rental metrics and criteria to be able to utilize, the apartments that we have at our disposal. So Kaylee Silver from Montgomery County, who's the administrator in that housing office space, and I worked on this proposal, and I thank everybody for the support. We'll both be attending the Narberth Civic Association because I think they would be our lead partnership if we were to get these funds and explore this option. That's all I have. We already talked about zoning, so there's nothing else to report.
Okay, thank you. Public health and safety.
Yeah, we're meeting tomorrow morning at 8, and on our agenda we're going to be looking at shade tree recommendations, updating our current ordinance.
Sorry, Rob, could you maybe get a little bit closer to your microphone? We can't really hear you at all.
Okay, yeah. Is that any better?
That's much better.
Okay. So we're going to talk about shade tree ordinance suggestions coming from Carson Clark and Bailey's. Carson's going to be with us in the morning at 8 a.m. We're going to start with that. And then we're fine-tuning the review process of traffic concerns. We have our equipment working now, and we're going to look at that process now that it's up and running. And then
Yeah, sorry, Rob. Sorry, you're
Can't hear you, Rob.
You're going in and out.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that's good. We meet at 8 a.m. So join us if you want more of an update.
All right. Thank you, Rob. Sorry. Finally, it's parking ad hoc.
Sure, I just have quick things. We're hoping that Park Global will be live by the end of the month. So look for that. There'll be announcements out about that. And we expect to be bringing the municipal parking lot ordinance to you, the business meeting to consider it for advertisement. And our next meeting is Tuesday at 8 a.m.
All right.
The 10th.
Thank you. Are there any announcements? All right. And I'll just say, Cindy already mentioned it, but council will have an open house tomorrow at First Friday in front of Sweet Naples. So come.
What time?
I think it starts at, is it 5 or 6? 5. I think it starts at 5.
I thought I saw 6 recently, but in a Facebook post, but I could be wrong.
What time do you want?
Yeah.
Let's
Just one for 6.
Okay, apparently it's 6.
6? Okay.
Well,
I'm rolling.
we may be out there later. We'll see.
Yeah.
All right. Any other announcements? Okay. We will have an executive session to discuss personnel issues, including borough manager bonus matrix and COVID testing enforcement for borough employees. And we will also discuss the possible disposition of borough property. I don't believe we will come back in session.
I'm sorry I put it in that order. I don't think we're going to need to.
Yeah.
Folks, it is 5 o'clock for the record before we hang up publicly. NARBAR starts at 5 p.m. tomorrow.
5 p.m. tomorrow. All right, thank you.
Borough calendar says 6, so.
Nonetheless, 5 p.m.
I might want to change that.
Well,
Yeah.
It's okay.
We can fix it on time. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will not be returning after.
Oh, sorry, yeah, wrong. I was wrong.
All right.
I was looking at something else. Sorry.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? All right. All those in favor of adjournment? Okay, thank you. We are adjourned.
Stop recording.